Chapter 301, Meeting and Arrival. The forest lay quiet as Uchiha Shisui and his squad hunkered down among the undergrowth, muscles coiled and senses alert. A sudden crack of twigs made them freeze. Someone was coming. Through the trees strode Nathan, flanked by a dozen battle-worn shinobi. He swept his gaze across the clearing and called out with authority, "Show yourselves." One by one, the ambushed warriors emerged, their bodies swathed in grimy bandages, each breath ragged and shallow. The sight of their battered state confirmed what Nathan's rescuers already feared. These men had been caught in a trap. Shisui sprang forward to Nathan's side, concern etched on his face. "Nathan, who are these reinforcements?" Nathan turned and nodded toward a tall figure standing just behind him. The man's presence radiated quiet strength. "This is my uncle, Uchiha Yashiro." As soon as he heard that the mist ninja had broken through our defenses, he rushed here with backup to make sure we were safe. Recognition flared in Shisui's eyes. "Uncle Yashiro," he dropped immediately into a respectful salute. "Shisui, at your service." Uchiha Yashiro returned the salute with a small, approving smile. He studied Shisui with a discerning eye and said, "So you're Shisui, are you? Impressive work out there." Relief and pride welled up in Shisui's chest. With their lines now bolstered and their comrades safe, the tide of battle had turned once more in their favor. Very good. After a quick round of introductions, Uchiha Yashiro held back any further pleasantries. There were still survivors nearby, people who had just lost friends and companions, and an overly exuberant greeting to his own allies might have only fueled their resentment. Though Yashiro personally cared little for such social niceties, he understood how appearances could affect morale. He turned to the assembled group, asking for every detail of the encounter. At the same time, he sent a team to the site of the battle to verify the story firsthand. This wasn't a matter of doubting Nathan or his companions, it was simply standard procedure. The village measured credit and assigned mission ranks only after independent confirmation. If they accepted unvetted reports, every skirmish would be hurriedly logged as an A rank, or worse, an S rank mission. In any organization, rules were the backbone. Without them, chaos reigned. Nathan paid little mind to the paperwork. In fact, the arrival of Yashiro and the others gave him the first real opportunity to unwind. He'd never been much for leadership or management, and for now he was content to let the village handle the details. Nathan decided to take advantage of the lull to drill his palm immortal technique once more. Until now, with both the captain and deputy captain gone, and Shisui struggling to rally the troops, he'd never felt secure enough to devote himself to training. But with Uchiha Yashiro and the others stepping up, he could finally lay those concerns to rest. At last he would practice both the palm immortal and chakra refining techniques without fear of interruption, strengthening his body and unlocking its hidden reserves. They remained at the makeshift camp until mid-afternoon. Yashiro needed time to resurvey the battlefield's changing contours, and Nathan's wounded companions required proper rest. Earlier, to conserve chakra, Nathan had only stabilized their injuries rather than fully heal them, so after hours of forced marches, they were exhausted. Now that the area was secure, everyone took the opportunity to recover. By mid-afternoon, the group was ready. With renewed energy and a clearer picture of enemy positions, they set off once more, racing toward the frontline command post. In the afternoon, Nathan and the others set out again. This time there were no mishaps, and their journey proceeded smoothly. As dusk approached, they finally arrived at the frontline command center, situated on the easternmost edge of the Land of Fire, just a stone's throw from the coast. Across the strait lay the territory of the Land of Waves. Awaiting them was Captain Narakiku, a seasoned shinobi of the Nara clan and the leading candidate for commander-in-chief. He was a contemporary of clan head Nara Shikaku and renowned for an intellect that eclipsed that of most ninja. No sooner had Nathan and his team reported their findings than Kiku's calm facade cracked. Cross-referencing their account with the intelligence gathered by Uchiha Yashiro, he realized something didn't add up. How had Mist Village operatives managed to punch through Konoha's northern defense lines so effortlessly, especially when the village had established 3 successive defense lines and even a forward base to guard against exactly this sort of incursion? His frown deepened. Clearly, Someone on the enemy side was pulling strings beyond normal reconnaissance or brute force. Nathan studied the map before him. 3 concentric coastal defense lines girdling the land of fire. To the north lay the Kingdom of Soup. To the south, the Kingdom of Whirlpool, and between them, the central bulwark. These layered fortifications had held back countless raids from the hidden mist village. Indeed, they had been breached individually in the past, but never all 3 in quick succession. Yet just yesterday, a squad of mist ninjas had exploited a flaw in the northern defenses, slipped past the outermost barrier, then punched through the second and third lines without warning. By dawn, they had surged into the heart of Fire Country. At first, Commander Narachigwang had chalked it up to a lucky strike, but the precise timing of the reinforcements' ambush left him uneasy. This was no random raid, it was a deliberate conspiracy. Nara's sharp gaze shifted from the War Council's battle plans back to Nathan, who stood at attention across the table. He recalled the dossier's description of their suspected ringleader, an unassuming monk whose record matched every detail of recent intelligence. The answer, plain as day, settled in his mind. The monk was the true architect of this audacious attack. Now the real question was how to stop him, before the enemy tore the realm apart from within. Nara Keiko studied him intently. Of all the possible suspects behind the Uchiha conspiracy, only one name fit. Danzo and his root operatives. No other group could strike so decisively and leave no trail. And yet, Keiko shook his head. Nathan closed his notebook and met Keiko's gaze. "I've recorded everything you've told me. Is there anything else?" Nathan hesitated, fingertips grazing the page. He wanted to mention Aburame Ryoma and the others, but decided against it. Even if Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi learned of their involvement, Nathan was certain he wouldn't betray them to Danzo. And since Sarutobi himself sought to counterbalance the Uchiha, what motivation would he have for needless subterfuge? In a world where strength speaks louder than words, it made more sense to strike than to debate. Better to remove Danzo altogether than to get bogged down in politics. Shaking off the thought, Nathan stood and closed his folder with a soft snap. "No, that covers it." Keiko nodded slowly, though his expression remained guarded. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Nathan tucked away his notes and stepped forward. Outside the door, the village waited, and with it, the chance to end Danzo's schemes once and for all. "I have nothing else to add." "Is that so?" Commander Narachigwang paused in thought, his fingertips drumming lightly on the table. After a moment, he sighed and said, "Very well, you're dismissed. Go get some rest." "Yes, Captain." Nathan stood, nodded curtly, and walked out without looking back. As the door closed behind him, Narachigwang watched his retreating figure, a frown creasing his brow. He was certain Nathan was hiding something, yet without proof, there was little he could do. He pushed back his chair and stared at the blank parchment before him. The breach in the northern defense line wasn't of itself catastrophic, but it was imperative that Hiruzen Sarutobi know exactly who was responsible. If Nathan continued these unauthorized maneuvers, the authority of the commander-in-chief would be undermined. In this moment, only the third Hokage held enough sway to rein him in. Suppressing a wry smile, Narachigwang picked up his quill and began composing his report. Chapter 302, Attitude. The first rays of dawn had barely crept through the shutters of Gen's headquarters when Danzo slammed the morning dispatch onto his desk, his temper flaring. The report from the East Coast Frontline Command was devastating. The support unit sent to ambush the 2 Uchiha operatives had been all but annihilated. Yet Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Nathan had emerged unscathed, and Nathan's power had proven so overwhelming that nearly every special Junin and Junin in the escort, including 2 of the feared 7 ninja swordsmen, had fallen. Danzo's lips curled in fury. "Worthless trash, all of them," he spat, voice cold as steel. He turned to the root operative kneeling at his side. "Have we heard anything from Team Ryoma?" The shinobi's posture stiffened. "Not yet, Lord Danzo." A vein throbbed in Danzo's temple as he ground out the words, but before he could issue new orders, a sharp rap sounded at the door. "Enter," he commanded. Moments later, the door swung open to admit a breathless messenger bearing fresh intelligence. A short while later, a messenger from the Ambu crept into Danzo's chamber. He offered a sealed warrant. "Sir," he said, voice low, This came directly from the Hokage. He requests your immediate presence in his office. Danzo took the warrant and let out a mocking laugh. Huh, summoned by the Hokage? Now he wants to play the friendly host? 30 minutes passed. Inside the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk, pipe in hand, the tip glowing softly as he drew another long pull of smoke. A report lay open before him, its pages marked with grim tidings. Suddenly, the door burst open. Without waiting for an invitation, Danzo strode in. Hiruzen didn't need to look up to know who had arrived. No one else would barge in like this. Before the Hokage could speak, Danzo cut him off with a curt, "Hiruzen, what's this all about?" Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk, pipe in hand, when Danzo's brusque dismissal cut through the stillness. "I'm still busy," Danzo snapped without looking up. Hiruzen set his pipe aside and leveled his gaze on Danzo. "Danzo, surely there's something you need to report to me." Danzo blinked and feigned ignorance. "A report?" Hiruzen reached into a stack of documents and flung a fresh scroll onto the desk. "This. Explain it." With a sigh, Danzo picked up the parchment and skimmed it. "It just says our defense line was breached. What more is there to explain?" Hiruzen's eyes narrowed to slits. "You dare claim no responsibility for this failure?" Danzo's bravado faltered under the Hokage's stare. He lowered his head and spoke in a quieter, grudging tone. "Hokage-sama, rest assured, the mist shinobi could only penetrate that single weak point. I guarantee there will be no further incursions." Silence fell over the office as the two leaders exchanged a tense, unspoken challenge across the desk. Hiruzen Sarutobi leaned back in his chair, exhaling a lazy plume of smoke. He watched Danzo Uchiha across the desk, his expression unreadable. "Forget it, for now," he said quietly. "But I don't want to see this happen again." "Understood, Danzo?" Danzo's only reply was a cold, contemptuous snort. No promise followed. Silence settled in the Hokage's office, broken only by the soft tap of Hiruzen's sandals against the wooden floor. He finally stopped pacing, tapped his pipe against the bronze ashtray, and let the last wisp of smoke drift away. "All right," he continued, "let's move on to the next issue." Danzo lifted an eyebrow. "A second issue?" With a quick motion, Hiruzen produced a thick folder from a stack at his side and tossed it onto Danzo's desk. "Explain this to me. What happened to these 5 shinobi?" Danzo snatched up the dossier and rifled through its contents. Inside were grainy photographs of 5 badly charred bodies and detailed autopsy notes, little more than burn patterns and bone fragments. He scowled, jaw tightening. "This is useless," he muttered. "With them reduced to ashes, there's no way to confirm who they were. The residues of secret medicine and the imprint of cursed seals are far harder to conceal than a mere disguise, and they reveal more about a shinobi's origin than any mask. When our medical corps examined the bodies of those 5 operatives, every trace matched the Root organization's tissue cultivation techniques. In other words, there was no doubt they were Ryu's Anbu agents from Root. That, precisely, was why the Anbu carry orders to leave no trace of their deaths. Recovering a corpse gives the enemy time to analyze those telltale marks, to prove where the shinobi came from. Unfortunately for us, Aburame Ryoma and his team fell so abruptly that the self-destruct contingency never kicked in. Their bodies lay intact. When Lord Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen laid out his dossier, the names on the report were unmistakable: Aburame Ryoma and his 4 subordinates. The evidence stood before Danzo so plainly that he could no longer maintain his guise. He tossed the report aside with a single motion and said, "It's nothing more than dispatching a few operatives to deal with some dangerous elements." "Dangerous elements?" Hiruzen's hand slammed onto the war table. "The Uchiha are shinobi of Konohagakure, not some band of marauders." Danzo tilted his head, letting his words hang in the charged silence. "Oh?" Danzo leaned back in his chair, a sly smile playing on his lips as he tossed a sheaf of battle reports across the conference table. "Hiruzen, take a good look at these," he said, pointing to the top sheet. "See those 2 shinobi? Especially that Uchiha Nathan. Tell me you still don't think they're a threat to the village." Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes flicked over the records. Kill counts, mission clearances, column after column of perfect scores. He hesitated, then said quietly, "They're Konoha Jonin. They've served the village loyally throughout the war." "Enough." Danzo cut in, his voice sharp. "You're being naive. Of course they fight for Konoha now, but what happens when peace comes? Who's to say they won't turn on us? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Remember how the last great Uchiha left the village? At the mention of that name, Hiruzen's face went pale. He fought down the memory of his childhood, the thunderous roar, the crackle of chakra like a storm, and towering Madara Uchiha striding through the smoke like a god of war. Only the original Hokages had stood any chance against him, and they're all gone now. If another Madara ever rose, what hope would the village have? Smoke from the brazier in the corner curled around Hiruzen's feet, casting flickering shadows across his troubled expression. Danzo watched him, unwavering. Finally, Hiruzen forced a calm smile. Danzo, you worry too much. An entrenched clan wouldn't risk rebellion, especially not two of our most decorated jonin. Danzo's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. We shall see, Hiruzen. We shall see. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the dossier in front of him. Whether we're talking about him or the first Hokage, he said slowly, they were both extraordinary. No one since has ever come close to their level. Danzo, standing just inside the doorway, arched an eyebrow. Is that so? Hiruzen set the file aside and let out a gentle sigh. We're at war, Danzo. Your last proposal to concentrate the Uchiha into the battlefronts at Kirigakure and Sunagakure has stirred resentment among their ranks. In future, run these decisions by me first. Danzo gave a short, amused chuckle. He turned toward the door, hand on the knob, but paused before leaving. With a steady gaze, he looked back at the third Hokage. Hiruzen, he said quietly, you are the light of Konoha. I am its shadow. I won't hesitate to root out any threat, no matter where it lurks. Without another word, he slipped out, the door clicking softly behind him. Hiruzen watched the corridor grow still, then reached again for the report he'd set aside. He opened it to the section on Uchiha Nathan's latest exploits. As he read, his brow creased in puzzlement. No one around could have guessed the question stirring behind the wise old Hokage's eyes. Chapter 303, Promotion. Nathan had been granted 3 days' leave from East Coast Command, and with it the freedom to explore his new surroundings. Every shinobi who'd arrived as reinforcement enjoyed the same respite, and those badly wounded were afforded even longer recovery. Early one morning, Nathan finished his ablutions, ate a simple meal, and slipped away from the shore. He needed privacy, and there was nowhere more secluded than the cluster of deserted islets and jagged reefs that dotted the open sea. Out here, he could train without fear of interruption. The vast ocean served as a perfect sound barrier, and without precise coordinates, no one would stumble upon him by accident. Finding a small, uninhabited reef, Nathan activated his shadow clone technique, creating 6 identical versions of himself. 2 of the clones immediately set to work, one honing the lethal precision of wind release, wind blade, the other refining the swirling power of the Rasengan. Their sole purpose was to push each technique to its peak until they felt flawless. Meanwhile, the remaining 4 clones scattered across the rocky islets, mapping the terrain, testing their stealth, and standing guard against any unexpected arrival. Each clone's assignment was critical. Whether deepening elemental control, sharpening reconnaissance skills, or ensuring the main training spot remained undisturbed, they all contributed to Nathan's rapid growth. As the sun climbed higher, the rhythmic whoosh of wind blades and the muted hum of spiraling chakra echoed across the reef, a testament to Nathan's unwavering determination to master his jutsu before his leave came to an end. Nathan surveyed the training ground. One shadow clone was focusing all its energy on mastering wind release spiral shuriken, but its current proficiency remained too low for the technique to be battle-worthy. Each failed attempt forced Nathan to resort once again to his Mangekyo Sharingan, a luxury his eyes could not sustain indefinitely. He needed to raise his jutsu level without delay. Nearby, 2 more clones worked in tandem on water release, one erecting a shimmering water formation wall, the other launching a nascent water dragon bullet jutsu. Both techniques were still in their infancy and urgently required refinement. Nathan knew his next clash with the Mist Ninja would almost certainly unfold on open water. Without well-honed aquatic skills, he would suffer unacceptable losses. The last clone held a practice sword, its movements precise and fluid. After last night's skirmish, Nathan's swordsmanship teetered on the edge of a breakthrough. He couldn't afford to let that momentum slip away. By assigning each clone a specific discipline, wind techniques, water defenses, and swordplay, Nathan hoped to accelerate his own growth across the board. Every perfected jutsu, every sharpened strike, brought him one step closer to victory and safeguarded the precious gift of his vision. Nathan intended to rely on his proficiency panel to push himself all the way to perfection. Once he'd allocated his resources, he dismissed his shadow clones one by one. Then he found a secluded spot and settled in to train. First the palm immortal technique, then the reflecting heart technique. Both arts directly refined his physical form, and thus could only be practiced by his real body. The clones were useless for this. By mid-afternoon, Nathan was back on the palm immortal sequence for the umpteenth time when a sudden flash of insight struck him. He paused, letting the revelation sink in. Almost at once, he felt his mastery of the technique deepen again. Could it be another upgrade? He whispered. He opened his proficiency panel. Sure enough, the palm immortal technique had climbed to level 8, 150,000. Nathan frowned thoughtfully. I wonder how much this will improve my healing. To test its potency, he brought chakra to the tips of his right fingers, shaped it into a razor-sharp point, and then sliced his left forearm. A thin line of blood welled up, brilliant scarlet against his skin. He watched closely, waiting to see how quickly or thoroughly the wound would close under his newly enhanced skill. Nathan paid it no mind and formed the hand seal in the blink of an eye, unleashing the palm immortal technique. A glowing sphere of yang escape chakra crystallized in his palm before he drove it straight into his wound. Immediately, flesh knitted and blood clotted, the gash closing at a rate visible to the naked eye. Nathan pressed his fingertips against the healed skin and sensed it clearly. The palm immortal technique's medicinal power had become noticeably stronger, yet it no longer consumed extra chakra as it once had. This was unquestionably good news. Seizing the moment, he reshaped the seal and called forth another surge of yang escape chakra, guiding it inward to bolster his body. 3 minutes later, the tingling reinforcement ebbed, and Nathan opened his eyes. As he'd hoped, his physical enhancement had also deepened. At this rate, in 3 or 4 days, his body would undergo another transformation, further elevating his physique attribute. A surge of joy welled up inside him, but he forced himself to settle his racing heart. With renewed focus, Nathan resumed his training under the moonlit sky. Today was shaping up to be an exceptional day for Nathan. Only a few hours after his palm immortal technique had broken through to a new level, his sword technique finally followed suit as evening fell. At the Desert Island Training Center, he drew upon the experiences and memories stored within his shadow clone and immediately sensed that his grasp of swordsmanship had soared to unprecedented heights. Panel. With that single thought, the proficiency interface sprang to life. A familiar curtain of pale blue light shimmered into view, ready to display the fruits of his latest advancement. Chapter X. Status Update. Nathan Uchiha, age 12, Attributes Constitution, 15, Spirit 19, Chakra Reserves, 13,500, previously 57,780, now 60,596. Bloodline, Sharingan, Kaleidoscope, 2,000, Synchron 89, 50,000, 3,201, 50 Thinging. Techniques and skill progress. Chakra Refinement Technique, level 5, 1,027, 5,000, 1,115, 5,000. Wind Escape, Windblade, level 6, 765, 10,000, 875, 10,000. Wind Release, Spiral Shuriken, level 1, 35, 200, 100, 200. Water Escape, Formation Wall, level 1, 84, 200, 119, 200. Water Release, Dragon Bullet, level 0, 136, 100. Shadow Clone Technique, level 4, 165, 2000, 109-2000. Chakra Absorption Technique, level 5, 3,515, 5,000, 3,615, 5,000. Rasengan, level 6, 902 Strength, 1,000 10,000. Palm Im Technique, Palm Immortal Technique, level 8, 150,000. Chakra Scalpel, level 5, 1,205,000, 1,550, 5,000. Reflecting Heart Technique, level 7, 12,950, 20,000, 14,486, 20,000. Illusion Swordsmanship, level 4, 701, 2,000. Instant sword skill, level 1, 162,200. Chakra control, level 5, 265,000, 2,320. Perfect skill, swordsmanship. Over the past week, Nathan spent most of his time on the road honing just 3 core techniques: the Palm Immortal technique, the Reflecting Heart technique, and the Chakra Refinement technique. His unwavering focus on these arts has steadily increased both his chakra capacity and his progress toward awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan. Nathan reviewed his progress. Aside from the slight boosts he'd gained in swordsmanship and the chakra scalpel, earned from treating the wounded and from skirmishes, the rest of his skills had only inched forward through today's cultivation. He'd expected as much. Once this crisis passed, he'd finally have the breathing room to train uninterrupted for at least 2 days. What came after that would depend entirely on how fiercely Kirigakure struck. With a soft groan, Nathan rolled up his training scroll, cast a quick glance at the sky, and headed straight back to headquarters. 3 days later, Nathan's brief respite was over. He reported in and received his new orders. He was to join the forward base at once. In response to Kirigakure's invasion, Konoha had established 3 coastal defense lines, North, Central, and South, and set up this forward staging ground farther inland. While the defense lines formed a continuous shield along the shore, the forward base served as the army's jumping-off point for counterattacks and reinforcements. Nathan paused for a moment on the road out of the village, tightening the straps on his pack. Beyond this point lay uncertainty, fresh battlefields, new allies, and the shadow of Kirigakure's looming assault. He drew a steadying breath, then pressed onward, determined to meet whatever came with blade and chakra ready. The outpost lay not in the Fire Kingdom, but across the sea in the Kingdom of Waves. Nathan's next assignment was to sail there and establish a garrison. Chapter 304, Forward Base. 2 days later, in the Land of Waves, a passenger vessel glided slowly into the harbor. As the gangplank lowered, a squad of renowned Konoha ninjas disembarked, and among them was Nathan. This mission marked their scheduled rotation and deployment to the forward base. Stepping onto solid ground, Nathan paused to glance back at the modest ship that had carried them across the sea, suppressing a wry shake of his head. Next to him, a companion nudged him. "That thing compares poorly to Kirigakure's warships," he muttered. Nathan nodded. The ship's light armor and leisurely pace made it virtually defenseless against any serious assault. Had they ventured much farther from the front line, an encounter with a Kirigakure patrol would have spelled disaster. But the Land of Waves simply couldn't support a heavy naval fleet. Geography dictates destiny. The Fire Country, with its vast territories and abundant resources, never felt compelled to master the seas or dominate the island nations far offshore. Its shipyards focused on trade vessels and riverboats, not armored frigates. By contrast, the Water Kingdom, barren, enclosed by endless ocean, has survived only by perfecting shipbuilding and seafaring. Nathan sighed and shifted his pack. Rules of the world forced them onto a humble passenger liner, but the real test lay ahead on land. With the forward base awaiting and unknown challenges looming, there was no turning back now. With those warships at their disposal, Kirigakure can maintain its incursions along the Land of Fire's coastline. After all, how else could Mist ninjas cross hundreds of miles of open sea merely by walking on water? The ocean offers no shelter. Every wave and gale puts life at risk, and the chakra drain alone would cripple an average shinobi. That's why one of the forward base's chief missions is to strike and sink any detected mist vessels. But that comes later. Right now, the priority is simply to become familiar with this new territory. When Nathan arrived at the advance base, he exchanged respectful greetings with several Uchiha clan shinobi and completed the standard check-in procedures. Once that was done, he made his way to the lodging assigned by the logistics division. Thanks to the Country of Waves' generous support, the base is well provisioned. There are no shortages of food, clothing, or equipment. As a jonin, Nathan was given his own small courtyard. Modest, but comfortable, and more than adequate for a shinobi of his standing. Nathan stepped into the small courtyard. Though modest in size, it contained everything he needed: barracks, training hall, and a simple living quarters. He paused only to survey his surroundings before heading straight for the training room. There, he pulled a handful of military ration pills from his pack, shoved them into his mouth, and began the chakra refining technique. Within moments, his chakra reserves were fully restored. "It's time to begin," he murmured. Forming a precise hand seal, Nathan unleashed the Palm Immortal technique. Instantly, a sphere of yang-imbued chakra condensed before him. He guided it through his meridians, flooding every cell and fiber with revitalizing energy. Minutes later, the chakra burst spent. Unfazed, Nathan resealed his hands and summoned the technique again. Once, twice, 5 times, 10 times. Over the next hour, he poured 3,000 to 4,000 chakra points into the Palm Immortal technique, repeating it 20-30 times in succession. Each cycle left his body stronger, tougher, more resilient. By the end, a tingling power surged through him. He could sense the threshold of transformation looming just beyond his reach. Breaking past your physical limits isn't something you can do half-heartedly, Nathan muttered, opening his eyes at last and letting out a frustrated sigh. He knew all too well that every time his body transformed, it was a total evolution. If it were easy to succeed, every shinobi would be a prodigy. Each successive leap grew tougher than the last. "Good thing I've still got one trump theft ard left," he added under his breath. In an instant, Nathan's eyes shifted, the familiar 3-tomo pattern of his Sharingan dissolving into the swirling black sun design of the Mangekyo Sharingan. An oppressive mental force radiated outward, pinning anyone nearby under its invisible weight. This, he reminded himself, was why he hadn't attempted the evolution back on the ship. Although he'd stored enough chakra during the voyage, he needed the Mangekyo's power intact for a moment like this. Blood-tinged tears slid from his right eye as he activated his most secret pupil technique, human control, to bless his own body with its power. No sooner had he done so than a strange, guiding presence stirred at the edge of his consciousness, whispering possibilities he'd never dreamed of before. Nathan wasted no time. He formed another hand seal and unleashed the Palm Immortal technique. But unlike the dozens of times before, this time the yang-released chakra flooded every corner of his body, and the cells and tissues, already reinforced, began to evolve precisely as Nathan willed. Until now, he'd come within a hair's breadth of true transformation, but under the direct guidance of human control, he shattered the final limitation. Human control was coveted by only the highest cultivators. It granted absolute sovereignty over one's own evolution, a power that resembled divine providence. For a few taut seconds, Nathan's form reshaped itself, and when he felt the process complete, he deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan. He closed his eyes, focusing inward to map the full scope of his changes. Minutes ticked by in silence. 30 minutes later, Nathan opened his eyes, and a sudden surge of life force radiated from him. It wasn't a deliberate release of technique, but simply the overflowing energy of his newly perfected body. If someone like Orochimaru from a later generation had seen what just happened, he'd have fought tooth and nail to use Nathan as a vessel for the reanimation jutsu. Fortunately, the uncontrolled surge of energy didn't last long. Within minutes, the leakage stopped. His transformation was complete. Nathan opened his status panel and surveyed the results, though there was nothing to surprise him. His physique trait had climbed from 15 to 16, pushing his physical potential into a new tier. He closed his eyes for a moment and flexed, savoring the change. Just as before, his theoretical chakra ceiling had gone up by 20,000 points. In theory, boosting physique from 15 to 16 should have been tougher and more rewarding than the jump from 14 to 15. Yet the increase was identical. The reason was simple. Reaching 15 had broken a critical threshold, granting a bonus surge that made both gains feel the same. All in all, a steady, powerful step forward. Nathan's breakthroughs didn't stop at new techniques. The very limits of his chakra pool expanded as well. His maximum chakra rose from 140,000 to 170,000 points. At the same time, his recovery rate improved in 2 ways. First, his natural regeneration climbed from 80,000 to 96,000 points per day. Second, his enhanced physique allowed him to sustain the chakra refining technique for 12 hours instead of 11. Since the refining technique restores 2,000 points of chakra for each hour of operation, Nathan now recovers 96,000 plus 12 times 2,000, equals 120,000 points daily, almost 18,000 more than his previous 102,000. Having absorbed these gains, Nathan spent a moment in silent meditation, then channeled 14,000 of his daily chakra allotment into two signature water-release jutsu, Water Formation Wall and Water Dragon Bullet. By dividing the extra energy equally, he boosted each jutsu's daily quota from 3,000 points to 10,000 points. With his reserves deeper and his recovery faster than ever, Nathan was poised to push his techniques and himself to new heights. By reallocating his resources this way, Nathan's daily proficiency gains in those two skills would jump from 35 points to well over 115 points. He then took the remaining 4,000 chakra points and poured them straight into Wind Release, Spiral Shuriken, boosting its daily chakra allotment from 10,000 to 14,000 points. As a result, that technique's own proficiency gain climbed from 65 points to more than 90 points per day. At this rate, all of Nathan's skills were poised to advance by leaps and bounds very soon. Chapter 305, News. A week slipped by in the blink of an eye. Since arriving at the forward base, Nathan had acquainted himself with every guard post, supply depot, and sally point. Before long, he was leading his squad on patrols through the nearby coastal waters. He fully expected to clash with the Mist Ninja at any moment. After all, only a dire threat would have drawn reinforcements all the way from the Rain Country front. Yet day after day, there wasn't so much as a whisper of their presence. It was as if Kirigakure's Shinobi had simply melted into the mist. When he paused to consider the bigger picture, however, the absence made perfect sense. Danzo's intelligence had lured their support detachment into a lethal ambush. Both sides paid dearly, but the Mist suffered grievous losses among their elite. Even Kirigakure felt the sting of defeat, especially after two of the legendary seven ninja swordsmen, Black Hole Leia and Loquat Juzo, fell in that battle. With such top-tier operatives gone, the Mist Village had no choice but to pull back and regroup. Nathan gave himself a small, satisfied nod. Finally, the balance of power was tipping in their favor. "Close ranks!" came a sharp shout from the dunes above. Without hesitation, the unit tightened its formation and prepared to press on. Before them lay the restless expanse of the Land of Waves, its waters concealing both danger and opportunity in equal measure. The Southeast Sea. A small Konoha patrol boat sliced through the evening waves as Nathan stood at the bow, eyes fixed on the burning horizon. "We're almost there," he announced, voice steady. The shinobi aboard nodded and adjusted their course toward the hidden coastal base. As they neared shore, Nathan leapt from the boat. In an instant, chakra flared beneath his feet, and he skated effortlessly across the water, coming to rest on the beach. He glanced back at Uchiha Tiehuo, the team's 14-year-old prodigy, marked by the mole above his brow, and called, "Tiehuo, I'm counting on you to see this through." Tiehuo sighed with mock exasperation. "Again, boss?" Nathan cracked a grin. "Sorry to burden you." With that, he turned and dashed toward a distant reef, where shadowy rock formations loomed against the twilight. From the boat, Tiehuo's voice rang out, "Don't forget, our spar is in 3 days." Without slowing, Nathan raised his right hand in salute, then vanished into the gathering dusk. On deck, one of the Konoha shinobi watched Nathan's retreating figure. "He really never stops practicing, does he?" His partner shook his head. "This patrol alone is hard enough." Nathan's routine was relentless. No matter how grueling the mission, he always stayed behind afterward to drill, pushing his limits well past what anyone else considered reasonable. "I don't know how he survives," one Konoha shinobi muttered to his companion, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's more than just stamina," another replied. Just then, a third ninja strolled up, overhearing them. "Did you notice how Captain's been weaving ninjutsu into every mission he's on? He's practicing on the fly." "Nonsense. We saw that," the first retorted bluntly. He let out an exasperated sigh. "Still, that's why I swear he's a pervert. I couldn't keep up with that kind of high-intensity training even if my life depended on it." His friend chuckled. "Ha, of course you can't." Before the conversation could dwindle, Uchiha Tiehuo, his dark eyes shining with a mix of pride and admiration, stepped forward. "You two underestimate him," Tiehuo said, voice confident. "Captain Nathan is one of the two prodigies of the Uchiha clan. Ordinary shinobi don't stand a chance against him. Tihuo's loyalty wasn't always so steadfast. When Nathan first arrived in Konoha, Tihuo had been skeptical, especially after Nathan descended from the skies, cloak billowing, and challenged him. But after being swiftly and humblingly defeated, Tihuo's respect turned into unwavering devotion. Over countless sparring sessions, that respect blossomed into outright fandom. Han himself paid little attention to the chatter. In fact, he welcomed it. Whenever time came to handle the squad's bureaucracy, supply requisitions, training schedules, minor discipline issues, Nathan simply glanced over at Tihuo and gave a casual nod. Tihuo would snap to attention and shoulder the burden without complaint. It was a small gesture of gratitude from Nathan, but it ensured that trivial matters stayed well out of his way, so he could keep honing his skills on the battlefield. Nathan knew there was a price to pay for his new arrangement, the very challenge the stranger had mentioned. In practice, though, it turned out to be no more than serving as a training guide every 3 or 4 days. The effort required was minimal, so Nathan had no hesitation in agreeing. Today he stood alone on a cluster of offshore rocks, the waves thundering below. He took a moment to survey his surroundings. No hidden enemies, no traps. Satisfied, he placed his hands thoughtfully into the Ren seal and called upon his chakra. In an instant, a plume of violet smoke billowed out and 6 perfect shadow clones materialized around him. Without waiting for further instruction, each clone scattered in a different direction, settling into the training positions Nathan had predetermined. He watched them for a moment, his own form still. His personal swordsmanship was already honed to perfection. There was nothing left to practice there. Instead, he turned to the clone that had begun the basic sword drills and gave a new order. "Shift to phantom swordplay," he commanded. Unlike the instant sword technique, phantom swordplay didn't demand special chakra-conductive blades. With a subtle flick of their wrists, the clone's swordplay took on an ethereal quality, each strike and parry leaving a momentary afterimage in the air. Nathan nodded once, then stepped back to observe. In the coming hours, these clones would refine their phantom strikes, allowing Nathan to fulfill his promise with ease, while furthering his own mastery of the more elusive art. Nathan's primary challenge was to synchronize his Sharingan Genjutsu with an advanced sword technique, a fusion that demanded far more chakra than ordinary blade work. To meet this need, he earmarked a portion of his daily chakra reserve specifically for phantom sword practice. Fortunately, the drain wasn't crippling. With over 60,000 chakra points at his disposal, he could afford long training sessions, provided he interspersed them with sufficient rest. His routine became a simple cycle. Train for hours, pause for half a day to recover, then dive back in. This ebb and flow of exertion and recuperation slowed his overall pace compared to a relentless grind, but it made sense. Nathan wasn't a machine. He needed breaks to stay sharp. By balancing work and rest, he avoided burnout while steadily improving both his genjutsu coordination and his swordplay. Before he realized it, evening had fallen. The shadow clone exercise was complete. Nathan extended his remaining chakra to absorb every fragment of the clone's experiences and memories, weaving them into his own skill set. With that last transfer finished, he tucked away his tools and headed back to the forward base, ready to rest, and ready for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Nathan slipped into the moonlit courtyard and came to an abrupt halt. Instantly, his Sharingan flared open as he swept his gaze across the shadowed corners. A soft meow drifted to his ears. Curious, he stepped forward and spotted a large, coal-black cat sprawled on a stone ledge, meticulously licking its paw. Instead of bolting, the creature lifted its head and fixed Nathan with a steady, unnervingly human gaze. Its eyes paused on his Sharingan, then, utterly clearly, it spoke. "Uchiha Nathan?" Nathan's breath caught. This was no ordinary stray. It was a ninja cat. He gave a terse nod. "That's me." The cat, Black Cat, as Nathan would soon learn, exhaled in what sounded like relief laced with irritation. "Where have you been? I've been waiting forever." "What's the matter?" Nathan asked, brushing aside the feline's grumbling. With a flick of its tail, Black Cat produced a small, folded note from beneath its paw and dropped it at Nathan's feet. "The person you're looking for has been found," it announced. Nathan crouched, picked up the note, and read the single line that would change everything. "Grandma told me to give this to you," the young messenger said, offering Nathan a folded slip of parchment. "Grandma Cat," Nathan murmured softly, his thoughts snapping back to Elder Huoshuan's parting counsel. If the artisan country's leader had truly been located, then the Kusanagi sword he'd been hunting might finally be within reach. He unfolded the note. Sure enough, it bore nothing but an address. Chapter 306, Race Against Time. "Grandma Cat," Nathan whispered, recalling the promise he'd made to Elder Huoshuan before setting out. If the leader of Craftsman Country had truly been located, then the legendary Kusanagi sword would soon be within his grasp. He unfolded the slip of paper in his hand and scanned the hastily written address. No doubt this was where Takunin Village's leader was hiding. Tucking the note into his tunic, Nathan knelt to face the sleek black cat at his feet. "I've got what I need. You can go back to your own life now." The cat let out a single soft mew, more a chirrup than an ordinary meow, then sprang onto the courtyard wall with effortless grace. It paused just long enough to meet Nathan's eyes, as if offering a silent farewell, before vanishing into the night. Nathan watched the empty air for a moment, then sighed and headed back to his quarters. After a quick wash, he sat on the edge of his futon, the address burning in his pocket. He couldn't let the Uchiha clan ninjas move first. Besides, he had already promised Elder Huoshuan he would handle this mission personally. There was no time to waste. Nathan knew it would be far too risky to delegate this mission. He wasn't about to alert the enemy by relying on someone else. Frankly, he trusted no one but himself. Nor could he afford to let a shadow clone slip through enemy lines. According to his intelligence, the leader of the Takumi ninja village was indeed hiding somewhere in the landlocked nation of Takumi. Although the nation bordered the Land of Waves, its interior terrain and tight security made infiltration treacherous. Sending a decoy only raised the chance of detection, and failure was not an option. Above all, there was no time to lose. The village leader was notorious for moving constantly. If Nathan hesitated, his quarry would disappear into the wilderness, forcing a costly and uncertain manhunt. Weighing every factor, Nathan realized his only choice was direct action. He would strike with absolute force, overwhelm his opponent himself, and claim the Kusanagi sword before any other could interfere. Nathan realized that the Amagiri ninja hadn't been able to return in days, and with no battles breaking out, he knew this was his best chance. If he waited for the war to flare up again, an opportunity like this might never come. Without another second's hesitation, he brought his hands together into the Ren seal and unleashed the shadow clone technique. A burst of chakra smoke filled the air, and an identical Nathan materialized beside him. "The rest is up to you," Nathan said, his tone steady. The clone inclined its head. "Don't worry, I'll handle everything here. Get back to me as soon as you can." Nathan gave a curt nod, then moved quickly to stow his gear. He slipped out of the yard, weaving deftly between the patrols, both those on watch and those strolling off duty, until he'd left the base entirely behind him. There was no question of boarding a ship now. Speed was too important, and even if detection wasn't an issue, a slow vessel was simply out of the question. Peace might hold for a little while, but who could say for how long? If he wanted to succeed, he had to strike with all the speed he had. Compared to a creaky boat, nothing beat sprinting across the sea under his own power. Nathan stood atop a secluded cliff, eyes sweeping the shoreline until he was certain no one was watching. Then, crouching, he launched himself into the night-shimmering waves. He broke the surface a few dozen meters offshore. Channeling his chakra into the soles of his feet, he exploded forward, skimming the water's surface like a silver arrow. Each step left a fleeting white trail behind him, rippling across the dark sea. He could feel his energy draining, but just as quickly refilling. At this rate of chakra recovery, he could keep his pace for hours. Relaxing for the first time since setting out, Nathan allowed himself a small, confident smile. All that remained was to steer west toward the Fire Country. The Wave Country's border was Bar, only a stone's throw away at his speed, and the moon riding high in the sky would guide him. Even if he drifted off course, the detour would be negligible. Nathan pressed on, leaves of silver light dancing in his wake, his destination drawing ever closer. Nathan shrugged off any lingering doubts. As long as our landing point wasn't wildly off course, he could adapt on the fly. Besides, we'd all be coming ashore. There simply wasn't any beach we couldn't use. Hours later, dawn broke. Nathan stood at the prow, eyes fixed on the widening strip of coastline. He let out a slow breath, then stilled himself and swept his senses across the water. No Konoha patrols, he was clear. He knew the Hidden Leaf's coastal defenses were built to stop full-scale invasions, not a lone shinobi. For a skilled ninja, no terrain was impassable. A sheer cliff face could be scaled as easily as strolling down a street. Nathan fit that description perfectly. Before long, he slipped past the 3 layers of border sentries and watchtowers. With the sky now fully bright, he paused only long enough to gather his strength. Then he set off again, racing inland toward the land of craftsmen. Nathan pressed on in a straight line, determined to shave every possible second from his journey. Whether he faced steep ravines, rushing rivers, or rugged foothills, he relied solely on his own strength, and paid little heed to the chakra he expended. By the next afternoon, he stood at last on the outskirts of the Kingdom of Craftsmen. Nestled northeast of the Fire Kingdom and bordering the Waves Realm, the craftsman's territory lay surprisingly close, hence Nathan's swift arrival. Yet the ceaseless march had taken its toll. Though he held no illusions about underestimating the craftsman leader's prowess, he resolved to rest before venturing deeper. He slipped into an abandoned village and settled inside a collapsing hut. Popping a couple of soldiers' ration pills to stave off exhaustion, he closed his eyes and let fatigue claim him. As slumber beckoned, his thoughts circled back to the day's shortcomings. A jutsu for rapid travel would have spared him this weariness, and he remembered an old ambition, to master the legendary Flying Thunder God technique. Perhaps now, with time to recuperate, he could finally devise a way to learn it. Nathan shook his head. The Flying Thunder God technique alone wouldn't be enough. It only teleports you to preset tags. What he needed was a jutsu for sustained, high-speed travel. After all, in a world with no air traffic control, nothing beat flying. Flying ninjutsu? He murmured, tilting his gaze upward. He sifted through his past life memories, hunting for a shinobi technique that granted true flight. Almost immediately, he recalled the 3rd Tsuchikage Onoki's famed Earth release, super lightweight and heavy style, often called the Earth Escape technique. By drastically reducing the user's body density, it produces a buoyant, floating effect. It wasn't true flight, but it outclassed most other airborne jutsu in both power and simplicity. Still, Nathan felt that Onoki's approach wouldn't suit him. He extended his right hand, molding a sphere of wind-release chakra in his palm. The tiny vortex spun briskly, glinting in the sunlight. Maybe I can invent my own flying ninjutsu. He clenched his fist around the swirling chakra, determination flaring in his eyes. Chapter 307, Success. Nathan stood alone in the ruined village, his breath ragged as he gathered his thoughts. After a long moment, he shifted his stance, clenched his palm, and shattered the small sphere of wind-escape chakra he'd formed. He had once planned to develop a new wind-based flying ninjutsu, but now was not the time. 2 things mattered more than anything. First, the timing was wrong. His immediate priority was delivering the Kusanagi sword into the hands of the artisan ninja village's leader. Everything else could wait. Second, his own foundations were still too weak. Although he'd created an A-rank technique and even an S-rank move, his version of the Rasengan and the Wind Escape, Rasen Shuriken, those jutsus rested on solid theoretical groundwork he'd inherited, not on a wholly original design. Crafting a truly new ninjutsu from scratch was a monumental task. Minato Namikaze himself had spent 3 years with Jiraiya's guidance to perfect the Rasengan. Left entirely to his own devices, it might have taken even longer. Nathan's secret advantage was the proficiency panel he carried, yet even so, forging a brand new art would demand countless hours he couldn't spare right now. He closed his eyes and pictured the village leader's austere face. The artisan ninja village needed that sword, not just to cement its power, but to stand as a symbol of hope for every craftsman within its walls. Nathan had promised to deliver it, and he would not fail. Opening his eyes, he swept the wind-torn landscape one last time. Dust swirled around the broken rooftops and downed pillars, but his resolve was undisturbed. Nathan took a deep breath, summoned the remaining chakra at his disposal, and set off toward the rendezvous point. The Kusanagi awaited its rightful owner, and with it, the promise of a new chapter for the artisan ninja village. Nathan had finally reached the point where he could fashion a rough prototype of a new ninjutsu. As long as the technique passed the panel's recognition, he could lean on his proficiency to refine and perfect it over time. While this shortcut would undoubtedly spare him countless headaches, he reminded himself that creating a truly novel ninjutsu wasn't something to be rushed. It would take more than a single day. Gently setting that ambition aside, Nathan closed his eyes and sank into a quiet meditative rest. Minutes slipped by, each one drawing the sun lower in the sky. At last, twilight fell, and Nathan stirred from his repose. After confirming the direction to the artisan ninja village leader's hidden refuge, he set off at a brisk pace. Several hours and a fading moon later, he arrived, dusty and worn, on the outskirts of a small town. From a distance, the settlement seemed untouched by conflict. Thin columns of smoke curled up from nearly every rooftop, and no sentries or patrols disturbed the evening air. Nathan paused at the edge of the road, unwilling to rush in. If a squad of ninja cats had the town under watch, it was likely others did too. He drew a steadying breath, preparing himself for whatever lay beyond those peaceful walls. Nathan didn't want to draw any unwanted attention, so he remained hidden until the last moment. Forming the familiar hand seals, he activated the transformation technique. In an instant, he took on the appearance of an ordinary villager and slipped through the town's gates. He didn't dawdle. His destination was a small, unremarkable courtyard near the edge of town. As he approached, Nathan paused. Through his chakra sense, he detected several shinobi lying in wait, watching this very spot. Adjusting his gait to look even more innocuous, he advanced to the courtyard gate and rapped sharply on the wooden door. Knock, knock, knock. No answer. He closed his eyes briefly, probing more deeply, but found no trace of living presence inside. Not here? He murmured, crouching to vault over the low wall with a single practiced motion. Almost immediately, he felt the hidden watchers tense, their attention sharpening like blades. They remained unseen, but our heightened scrutiny told Nathan everything he needed to know. His covert entry hadn't gone unnoticed. Calmly, he dropped to the ground on the other side of the wall, ready for whatever came next. Nathan let out a silent sigh of relief. He'd guessed correctly. His watchers wouldn't make a rash move. After all, they believed that, even if he had other motives, it would be far from easy to bring down the leader of the artisan ninja village. And as village chief, Nathan commanded more respect and strength than they realized. They decided to sit back and see what happened, convinced he posed no immediate threat. What they didn't know was that Nathan had every confidence in his ability to neutralize them in an instant, and that was precisely the wager he'd made. Now, with no surprise attack forthcoming, he could proceed with his plan. Swiftly and silently, he dropped from the wall, surveyed the perimeter, then slipped into the master bedroom. The house was unremarkable. Plain walls, simple furnishings. Nathan's sharp eyes flicked to the bed and mattress. They both bore the unmistakable impressions of recent use. He nodded to himself, satisfied that his information was accurate. Nathan crept forward with every nerve on alert. He'd confirmed that the chief of the artisan ninja village lived here. He'd simply stepped out for a time, and now Nathan had to move quickly. Slipping past hidden tripwires and spring-loaded blades, he stifled his breathing and pressed himself into the far corner of the main room, melting into the shadows as he waited. The night deepened around him. After what felt like an eternity, a soft creak signaled the courtyard gate swinging open. Nathan's heart hammered as he strained to catch every sound. First came the crunch of footsteps on gravel, then the gentle splash of water, someone washing at the stone basin, and finally the hush of fabric brushing against tatami as the chief made his way back inside. "Who's there?" a voice called from the bedroom beyond the corridor. Before Nathan could answer, a flurry of shurikens spun through the darkness. The chief of the artisan village stood in the doorway, tension coiled in his stance, ready to strike. In a single fluid motion, Nathan sprang from the corner. Like ink spilled across silk, he darted past the deadly blades, each one thudding harmlessly into the wooden wall. As Nathan slipped back into the dim interior, the chief's eyes widened in shock. He stared at Nathan's eyes, crimson irises flecked with inky tomo, and gasped, "Sharingan?" Nathan's heart pounded as he heard the whispered question behind him. "An Uchiha ninja?" He didn't hesitate. With a sharp inhale, he drew his long sword from its scabbard, channeling chakra into the blade until it hummed with lethal energy. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward, the blade arcing straight for the village chief's neck. The chief reacted instantly, twisting aside to dodge the strike. But Nathan pressed the advantage, advancing in a blur of precise, relentless cuts. The chakra-infused sword left faint trails of light in the air with each swing, forcing the chief onto the defensive. He parried and sidestepped, backpedaling as Nathan's strikes rained down in rapid succession. No ordinary opponent could withstand such an onslaught for long. After more than a dozen furious parries, the chief's guard finally slipped. In a heartbeat, Nathan's blade found its mark, and the illusion of steel met flesh in a clean, decisive strike. The chief's head tumbled to the ground, and his body collapsed. A victorious smile flickered across Nathan's face, until the world around him shimmered. The forest, the fallen body, even the blood-slicked ground dissolved in an instant. Nathan blinked and realized the sword was still sheathed at his waist. There had been no strike, no decapitation, only empty air. Before him stood the artisan village chief, unharmed and wide-eyed with shock. Nathan's grin faded. The real battle was just beginning. The moment the Takumi village chief glimpsed the red and black swirl of the Sharingan, he knew he'd been caught in an illusion. Everything that had happened just now, every word, every movement, had been a mirage. "You," he began, but a sudden, searing pain tore through his chest. Instinctively, he looked down and saw the kunai jutting from between his ribs. A jet of blood burst from his lips. Nathan stepped back out of the spray as the chief clutched at the wound, staggered 2 steps, and collapsed against the doorway. Within seconds, the village leader lay dead. Nathan approached, his cloak brushing against the blood-stained floor. With a soft metallic hiss, he unbuckled the scabbard at his waist and drew the longsword. The blade caught the torchlight, gleaming with a keen, lethal edge. Nathan infused a trace of chakra into the steel, and it responded with a smooth, humming vibration. He ran his fingers along the polished fuller, marveling inwardly. This is truly a rare weapon in the shinobi world. Its chakra conductivity is unparalleled. Chapter 308, Aftermath. In the ninja world, blades, whether dagger or sword, are all called swords. Nathan's kusanagi, though labeled a sword, is in fact a long blade, roughly 3 feet in length, 2 fingers across, single-edged, with a slight curve at the tip for both slashes and thrusts. He drew it free, tested its weight, and felt instantly awkward. He'd trained exclusively with a short sword up to now. The extra reach and balance of this weapon threw him off. Still, at his current swordsmanship rank, perfect level 7, he knew one fight would be enough to master it. He pressed his eye against the narrow gap in the door and scanned the moonlit courtyard. Beyond the high wall, he made out several figures patrolling atop a guard tower. After a few tense moments, he eased back from the crack. With a soft clang, the long sword slid home in its scabbard, settling comfortably at his hip. Nathan's gaze dropped to the motionless form at his feet, the fallen leader of the artisan ninja village. Tonight's battle had claimed more than he'd expected, and it was far from over. Nathan's blade wavered for a heartbeat as he considered killing his opponent. But ever since he'd arrived in this world, his hands had been stained with blood. One more life, or one fewer, no longer weighed on his conscience. After all, what ninja worth his salt hadn't taken lives to prove his strength? If Nathan himself ever fell by an enemy's hand, he knew he'd have no one to blame but his own weakness. In this brutal realm, the strong prey on the weak, among shinobi, among civilians, even between warring nations. Survival demanded power. With that clarity of purpose, Nathan banished his doubts. He shaped the familiar hand seals in rapid succession and unleashed his fire-style, great fireball technique. A roaring orb of flame burst from his palms, streaking through the night air. It struck the leader of the artisan ninja village head-on. In an instant, the man was engulfed in searing heat, his body collapsing into a smoldering, charred husk. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of dying embers. Nathan slipped into the courtyard and found a quiet corner. He extended his left hand, and in an instant the Rasengan, his signature swirling sphere of pale blue chakra, condensed in his palm. It grew to the size of a basketball before he pressed it firmly against the earth. With a muffled boom, the ground fractured, opening a deep pit. He lowered the body of the artisan ninja village's leader into the grave and shoveled the loose soil back over it. Buried in this hastily made tomb, the body would remain hidden for some time. Satisfied, Nathan stepped back, cast a casual glance over his shoulder, and slipped out of the courtyard, exiting the town without drawing attention. Over half an hour later, he found himself at the edge of a dense forest. Sprinting along a narrow path, he suddenly came to a halt. He turned to watch the shadowy tree line behind him. In the stillness, only the faint chirp of insects broke the silence. Nathan remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the darkness. 1 second, 2 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes passed. Then, without warning, a soft wind rustled through the leaves overhead. When the final breeze died down, Nathan spoke into the quiet. "Aren't you coming out yet?" But the forest gave him no reply. The only answer was silence. Nathan's ears pricked up. The usual chorus of insects had fallen abruptly silent. "You're not coming out?" he murmured to the gathering shadows. His expression hardened. "Fine, then go to hell." In a swift motion, he formed the necessary seals and unleashed Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. A blazing sphere roared from his mouth and rocketed toward a massive tree at the forest's edge. The impact sent a shower of sparks skyward as the bark caught, flames roaring to life and banishing the surrounding darkness in an instant. From the inferno's edge, a black shape burst forth, and with it, a volley of kunai. Blades whistled toward Nathan's vital points. But they weren't the only attackers. Kunai flew in from multiple directions, each one aimed to kill. Nathan's heart pounded. He tapped into his Sharingan, letting the world slow down as his eyes locked onto every trajectory and every hidden thrower concealed in the darkness. His mind raced. His reflexes sharpened to their limit. Twisting his body with inhuman grace, Nathan dodged each kunai in turn, left, right, forward, back, until not a single blade found its mark. Smoke curled around him, embers dancing in the air, but Nathan stood unscathed and ready for whatever came next. Nathan's hands flashed through the seals again as he unleashed another fire ninjutsu, fire style, phoenix fire technique. In an instant, dense spheres of flame burst from his palms, scattering like blazing embers and hurtling toward the waiting ambush. "Watch out! Damn it! Get out of the way!" The jungle erupted in chaos. Hidden ninjas leapt from the undergrowth, scrambling to evade the scorching spheres. Leaves crackled and fell as the fireballs exploded against trunks and foliage. Then, as quickly as it began, the inferno faded. Smoke curled in the humid air, and one by one, dark-clad figures stepped into view, forming a tight ring around Nathan. Despite the sudden danger, Nathan remained perfectly calm. He surveyed his adversaries with cool interest. None of them wore the forehead protectors of any recognized village, past or present. Instead, each had a deep slash across their metal plate, the unmistakable mark of a rogue shinobi. Only two powers in the ninja world could muster so many traitors, the Akatsuki, which had yet to emerge, or the clandestine black market. A shiver ran down Nathan's spine at the thought, for the black market was a shadow empire built on betrayal and bloodshed, and now he was standing right in its heart. Nathan knew that the black market maintained hidden strongholds in nations around the world, and with them, a grim mission system of its own. Unlike the relatively straightforward assignments posted by the 5 great ninja villages, black market jobs ranged from underhanded to downright cruel. Yet it survived precisely because those villages turned a blind eye. There were tasks so delicate or dishonorable that only this shadow network could handle them. In his previous life, Nathan recalled how, on the eve of the 4th Great Ninja War, the major villages had launched a sweeping campaign to purge black market activity from their territories, only to discover that rooting it out was far more difficult than they'd imagined. The 5 great villages remained unchallenged masters of the ninja world. Everyone else, from minor clans to mercenary bands, was little more than fodder. Even so, the black market endured. Its reputation for secrecy and ruthlessness drew in the most dangerous of fugitives, turncoats, criminals, and traitorous ninjas for whom no other refuge would suffice. Spies tend to be most active during wartime, so it didn't surprise Nathan that they'd shown up now. What puzzled him was their target. "I just don't get it," he said. "Why bother tailing the leader of the Takumi village? Knowing how mercenary they are, you'd think they'd try to capture him and demand a ransom." He leaned back, folding his arms. He already had a solid read on their capabilities. One elite Junin among them, but everyone else hovered at standard Chunin level. There was no need to set traps or run tests. If something didn't add up, he'd cut through the mystery with a straightforward question. Chapter 309, The Solution. Nathan stood calm and unflinching as half a dozen bounty ninjas closed in on him under the moon's pale light. He tilted his head, meeting their icy gazes. "You're the bounty ninjas hired to capture the leader of the artisan ninja village, correct? Yet here you are, skulking in the shadows, merely observing me. Why haven't you made your move?" One of the ninjas sneered, arms folded across his chest. "Since when do you get to give orders?" A second stepped forward, voice low and menacing. "We're not in the habit of answering to anyone. Besides, your eyes alone are worth a small fortune on the black market. Why spoil that profit by killing you too quickly?" The first ninja laughed, baring his teeth. "Enough talk. Let's see what he's made of." At his signal, all six lunged toward Nathan with silent speed. Swords and daggers flashed under the dim torches lining the corridor. Nathan exhaled, as if disappointed by their recklessness. There's a path to salvation you refuse to tread, and you break down a door to hell that doesn't even exist. With that, he drew the massive blade sheathed at his side. In an instant, the air around him seemed to harden. A chilling, murderous aura radiated from the steel, washing over the would-be attackers like a tidal wave of frost. The bounty ninjas skidded to a halt, eyes widening in shock. They had prowled the dark zone for years and prided themselves on facing the impossible, but this was something else entirely. Not one dared to take another step. Silence reigned as Nathan's blade lowered, each heartbeat echoing like a drum. In that quiet, the message was clear. He was not to be trifled with. Nathan's very presence carried the scent of blood, and every bounty hunter in the clearing instinctively recoiled. Yet in that instant, his illusory guise shattered. The tall, armored warrior they'd feared dissolved in a shimmer of light, revealing a slender boy standing alone in the firelight. "A kid?" one hunter whispered. "A little ghost," another spat. The dread that had gripped them vanished in an instant, replaced by coarse laughter. Their leader threw back his head and bellowed, "Now! Kill him!" In a flash, spears and blades were leveled at Nathan, but he didn't flinch. Calmly, he drew his long sword, its steel catching the glow of the torches. Then the forest thundered with the clash of metal, ding, dang, dong, as Nathan moved through the ring of hunters like a fish through water. He pivoted on one foot, swept his blade in a smooth arc, and each time an enemy's weapon came close, he met it with a precise, unerring parry. Remarkably, he never once launched an attack of his own. He simply absorbed every strike, letting his sword guide the enemy's steel aside. Under the dancing shadows of the trees, his expression never wavered. Cool, composed, as if every clang of metal were nothing more than a gentle reminder. No matter how fierce the assault, he would stand his ground. Nathan stood unmoved at the center of the circle, his breath steady as the last of his opponent's strikes fizzled out. Though 4 bounty ninjas pressed in on him, their arms were heavy with fatigue, and every desperate swing only widened the gaps in their defense under Nathan's keen sharing-in. Had he not needed to familiarize himself with his recently acquired longsword, he could have dispatched them long ago. Seconds bled into minutes. Then, without warning, one of the hunters, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, froze mid-lunge and gaped. You're the ghost sword Qingming." Nathan's head snapped up, brow arching in mild surprise. "Qingming? You heard me," the man's voice trembled. "Ghost sword Qingming himself." A murmur ran through the circle. The other bounty ninjas halted their attacks, drawing back slowly as though a chill had crept in at their heels. Nathan relaxed his grip on the hilt and let the longsword lower to his side. He met the scar-faced hunter's wide-eyed stare and cocked his head. "Oh, do you know me?" The man's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He offered no denial, only a quavering nod. The rest of the group exchanged uneasy glances and one by one took an involuntary half-step away from Nathan's calm, unthreatening stance. When the mercenary finally spoke, His expression was grudging, half recognition, half irritation. He hesitated, then muttered, "Who doesn't know the ghost sword Nathan, the one with a 17 million tail bounty?" He said it as if everyone should know, but the truth was different. Most bounty ninjas slithered around the black market's lowest ranks. A 17 million tail reward was more fantasy than fortune to them. They scarcely gave Nathan a second glance. Recognition only came after a drawn-out clash of steel and chakra when they'd felt his power firsthand. 17 million? Nathan smirked inwardly. That number reeked of underestimation. Even Sarutobi Asuma, blessed with the son of the Hokage bonus, had a bounty of 35 million tails. If Asuma's reputation merited that sum, Nathan deserved at least the same. Perhaps his name hadn't spread far enough yet. Shaking off the thought, he settled into his fight stance. No amount of misjudgment would stop him now. Nathan's mind raced. He couldn't hold back any longer. In one fluid motion, he drew his long sword and struck the bounty ninja before him. The others had already begun to scatter the moment they recognized his true identity. If they slipped away now, his mission and cover would be blown. He had to end this quickly. Swish. Before the man could react, Nathan's blade cut across his throat. Blood spurted as a strangled, gurgling laugh escaped the wounded ninja's lips. He staggered 2 steps, then collapsed in a crimson heap. The sudden violence jolted the remaining bounty ninjas from their stunned stupor. Their leader barked a command. "Split up, now!" But before the shout was finished, Nathan's gaze locked onto the man. His Sharingan flared to life, the red and black pattern hypnotizing every nerve in the ninja's body. In an instant, the leader froze solid, eyes wide with terror. Nathan sheathed his sword. He had no intention of killing this one. At least, not yet. Nathan slipped through the shadows like a wraith. When the first bounty hunter lunged at him, he rolled aside, his sword flashing in a white arc. The man crumpled unconscious to the damp earth. The others hesitated, and that hesitation was all Nathan needed. He moved with lethal precision, cutting them down one by one. None could match the lethal combination of his blade technique and the all-seeing Sharingan. With the clearing silent once more, Nathan turned to the sole survivor, the bounty squad's leader, who crouched, trembling, among his fallen comrades. Nathan grabbed him roughly by the shoulder and slapped him awake. The man's head lolled back. Confusion and fear filled his eyes. Without a shred of mercy, Nathan demanded, "Why did you tail the artisan village leader without ever arresting him?" We, the man stuttered, his gaze flitting wildly, desperate for any sign of help. Nathan's patience snapped. He raised a hand, chakra coiling around his fingertips. His eye flickered scarlet as he activated the Sharingan. "One more word of nonsense," he warned, "and I will pry the answer from your mind." Realizing the threat, the bounty leader's voice cracked. "No, wait, I'll tell you everything. Please, just don't." But Nathan was already several steps ahead. He unleashed the illusion, Sharingan, plunging the man into an unbreakable vision and delving deep into his memories. As the leader's eyes glazed over, the hidden truth of his orders and the shadowy forces behind them began to unravel. Rather than waste any more time, Nathan drew on a little chakra and reached directly into the other person's mind. The instant his illusion technique took hold, the voice on the other end went silent, and the subject's consciousness was swept away into Nathan's created reality. Nathan probed carefully, confirming there was no ruse or hidden shield, then began reshaping the illusion to guide the subject into revealing key memory. Within moments, the full truth spilled out before him. Chapter 310, Trouble. "You're nothing but a pawn. How irritating." Nathan muttered as he reached out and gripped the bounty ninja by the neck. With a firm twist, he heard a sharp snap. The man's head lolled to the side, utterly lifeless. Without ceremony, Nathan released him and let the corpse slump to the ground. As the body hit the floor, Nathan sifted through the stolen memories he just plucked from the ninja's mind. It wasn't that these mercenaries refused to strike at the leader of the craftsman ninja village. They simply couldn't guarantee a live capture. The black market contract demanded exactly that. Deliver him alive, not dead. With their combined strength, they could have killed him without breaking a sweat. But if the target died, there'd be no bounty. Realizing they'd risked everything for no reward, they'd chosen a different path. Rather than abandon the mission entirely, They sold their intelligence to someone else in the black market. According to the scraps of memory Nathan possessed, those buyers had already hired a more reliable team to finish the job. Nathan paused, eyes narrowing. So the true hunters were still out there, gunning for the craftsman village leader, and the stakes had just climbed higher. He sheathed his blade, slipping into the shadows. It was going to get messy. Nathan had no idea who would ultimately take on the mission. According to the latest intelligence, his contact was due to arrive by tonight at the latest. At first, their operatives assumed he was the courier. It wasn't until Nathan abruptly severed all communication that they realized they had the wrong man. And when word spread that he'd slain the chief of Takunin Village's artisan clan, they wasted no time in giving chase. That, of course, had been Nathan's intention all along. With his speed, he could have left any ordinary pursuer in the dust, unless someone even more formidable was tugging the strings. Now it seemed a hidden master, one capable of capturing a ninja of the late chief's caliber alive, had entered the hunt. The thought sent a cold spike through Nathan's spine. He grimaced as he mentally traced the footprints, broken twigs, and other signs he'd left behind. Should he double back and erase every trace, risking capture, or keep pushing forward and forgo any hope of vanishing cleanly? Caught between two dead ends, he weighed his options fiercely. Then, abruptly, a strange breath of energy sliced through the night around him, heightening every sense at once. Nathan halted at the edge of the burning forest, his long blade already in hand. The air crackled with flames and ash, but beneath it all, he sensed something far more chilling. That chakra, it isn't human, he muttered, tightening his grip. Through the wall of fire, a lone figure emerged. Black cloak billowing, face obscured by a stitched mask, he wore a scarred forehead protector from the hidden waterfall village. Two cold green eyes gleamed in the flickering light. Even without a face to match the name, Nathan knew instantly. Kakuzu. Kakuzu of the Akatsuki, one half of the so-called immortal duo. Years ago, he had risen to elite Jonin rank in the waterfall village and accepted a covert mission to assassinate the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. But ambition had outpaced his strength. Hashirama's power had overwhelmed him, leaving him grievously wounded and alive only because the first Hokage, indifferent, chose not to finish the job. Since then, Kakuzu had fused forbidden techniques with stolen hearts to piece himself back together, driven by an insatiable lust for money and eternal life. Now, the legendary rogue ninja stood before Nathan, green eyes fixed coldly on him. The world seemed to narrow to two warriors, one seeking survival and justice, the other lusting for unending power. And with that, the forest's roar faded, as if holding its breath for the battle to come. Nathan had endured countless hardships only to be dragged back to Longyan village and branded a failure. No sooner had he returned than he was thrown into a cell, accused of botching his mission and facing the harshest of punishments. He refused to accept such injustice. Under cover of darkness, he slipped out of his shackles, broke through the prison gates, and made off with Longyan's most jealously guarded secret, the Earth Resentment Tendril. This living, ebony-black tendril, resembling a throbbing blood vessel, was more than mere flesh. It could stitch flesh together, mend wounds instantly, and served as the catalyst for several forbidden arts. Most notorious of these was the secret technique, heart-seizing. By weaving the tendril through an opponent's chest, the user could wrench out the enemy's heart along with its unique chakra signature and splice both into his own body. In doing so, he not only healed himself, but also inherited the fallen foe's chakra nature. Now standing across from him was the very man who'd mastered that fearsome jutsu. Nathan activated his Sharingan, letting the world turn crimson and sharpen. 5 glowing chakra centers pulsed in the stranger's torso, 5 hearts, each a trophy harvested and grafted by that same black tendril. It was these extras that granted him not one but 5 distinct chakra natures, and reserves so vast they dwarfed those of any ordinary shinobi. The two warriors sized each other up in silence, power crackling on the air. Nathan's gaze flicked from the pulsating veins of the Earth Resentment Tendril to the cold, hungry stare in his opponent's eyes. Neither made a move, yet both understood that the next action would decide everything. Nathan's voice cut through the dim light as he spoke the name, and the man across from him immediately focused his attention. After a tense pause, Kakuzu finally replied, "Do you know who I am?" Nathan felt a surge of information flood his mind. He could have answered, "Not only do I know you, I know your every victory and defeat, from your earliest days in the Warring States to this very moment." But such secrets were not his to share. He forced himself to remain silent. He had never expected the black market's latest hire to be this legendary shinobi. Kakuzu's reputation spanned centuries of warfare. His combat record was so extensive that Nathan could scarcely imagine it. Against such an opponent, Nathan's own fighting skills might have seemed inadequate. Yet he wasn't afraid. He already possessed detailed dossiers on Kakuzu's strengths and weaknesses. And more importantly, he carried an ace of his own, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Even if he couldn't unlock its full power tonight, the very possibility of using it gave him unwavering confidence. After all, having a sword and choosing not to draw it is a wholly different proposition from never having a sword at all. Nathan stayed silent, refusing to answer. Kakuzu's lips twisted into a smirk. "Your ghost sword carries a bounty of 17 million taels," he said coolly. Nathan's heart sank. He'd hoped Kakuzu wouldn't remember that detail so readily. Before he could reply, Kakuzu continued, "You dispatched my quarry, didn't you?" He nodded toward the body lying at Nathan's feet. "You've got skill," he added, "so now you can use that skill to atone for my loss with your life." In the next instant, Kakuzu vanished and reappeared directly before Nathan, unleashing a blistering punch. The movement was so swift it seemed supernatural, yet Nathan had anticipated an attack from the moment Kakuzu emerged. Drawing on the acute perception of his Sharingan, he tilted his head just enough to let the blow sail past harmlessly. Seizing his chance, Nathan lunged back. His Kusanagi blade whistled through the air in a diagonal arc, slicing beneath Kakuzu's arm and driving upward. If the strike connected fully, there was no doubt it would sever his opponent's limb. At the critical moment, Kakuzu drew back his fist, wove the hand seals, and unleashed a B-rank ninjutsu, Earth-style, Earth Spear. Instantly, his flesh turned obsidian black, his skin hardening to diamond-like toughness. Nathan's long blade rang out against that impenetrable surface with a sharp clang. Kakuzu's express stayed unreadable as he slammed his right arm down, trying to trap Nathan's sword. At the same time, he swung his left fist in a vicious hook toward Nathan's face. But Nathan was nothing if not quick. He yanked his sword free, pivoted on his heel, and dove out of range just as Kakuzu's blow thundered into empty air. Seizing the opening, Nathan flowed into his next strike without hesitation. He pivoted, hefted his long sword, and slashed for Kakuzu's neck. To sharpen the blow, he infused wind escape chakra into the blade, coating its edge in a razor-thin layer of slicing gale. Chapter 311. Testing Squeak. A high-pitched rasp filled the air as Nathan's long sword sliced across Kakuzu's throat, leaving only a shallow, pale scar. Nathan frowned. What a pity, he thought. He still hadn't mastered lightning release, otherwise its natural advantage over earth style would have shattered Kakuzu's defenses far more effectively than his current wind techniques could. As it stood, he couldn't breach his opponent's guard. Fortunately, sustaining such a high-level ninjutsu was an enormous chakra drain, enough to wear down even someone like Kakuzu. Seizing the moment, Nathan plunged into a relentless assault, spinning his blade in a dazzling display of strikes. Forced onto the defensive, Kakuzu struggled to parry, yet his expression remained eerily calm. Those cold green eyes bore into Nathan without a flicker of fear or pain. Frustrated by the unchanging mask, Nathan activated his Sharingan. The world seemed to slow as the hypnotic red eye reached out, and for a brief instant, Kakuzu's stare wavered in surprise. Nathan seized the moment and thrust his long knife straight for his opponent's eyes. Even the Earth Escape, Earth Spear technique, which could harden the body like iron, couldn't guard against such a precise, vulnerable target. Jiaodu, caught off guard, jolted from his trance. A flash of cold light flickered as he instinctively raised his right hand to intercept the blade. Clang! Nathan's knife slammed into Jiaodu's palm, driving him backwards several steps until he crashed against a tree. Leaves rained down around him, but his blockade held firm. In the same instant, Jiaodu curled his fingers, intent on yanking the blade free and turning the tables. But Nathan was quicker. With a whip-fast motion, he retracted the knife and swept it in a vicious horizontal arc. The blade found its mark at Jiaodu's throat, slicing through flesh and severing the carotid artery. Crimson spurted out as Jiaodu staggered, blood gushing between clawed fingers, his eyes wide with shock. Nathan stood over him, breathing steadily, his knife still glinting in the dim forest light. Even with his earth spear at the ready, Kakuzu knew Nathan's blade, heavy, razor-sharp, and charged with wind-style chakra, would still wound him if it connected. And any attempt to block it squarely would drain even more chakra. To conserve his reserves and spare himself greater pain, he crouched low and slipped out of the sword's path. The only casualty of his dodge was the ancient tree behind him. Nathan's enchanted blade cut through its trunk like a hot knife through butter. With a thunderous crack, the massive tree toppled to the ground. Nathan backed away, eyes locked on his opponent. Kakuzu, however, barely budged. He'd only shifted a few inches, choosing to absorb the tree's full weight rather than flee. It cost him chakra, but it also bought him a vital opening. "Fire style, burning head," he roared. A torrent of flame burst from Kakuzu's hand, instantly reducing branches and underbrush to ash as it surged straight toward Nathan. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as the two powers clashed beneath its shattered canopy. Nathan hardly registered his opponent's hand seal through the tangle of branches overhead, but the instant the flame struck, he reacted on instinct. His fingers darted through the 5 seals, yin, si, yin, and he roared, "Water release, water array wall." A monumental sheet of water surged up and slammed into Kakuzu's inferno. After more than a week of focused training, Nathan had pushed this technique from its fledgling level 1 form, 119-200 chakra, all the way to level 3, 294-1000 chakra. That newfound power let him deflect the fire attack just in time. The impact was deafening. Scorching flames met the torrent of water in a blistering hiss, and a wall of steam shot into the air. In seconds, the clearing was swallowed by a thick, white mist. Nathan didn't worry. Ordinary steam would clear in moments and wouldn't hamper his Sharingan. Yet this fog refused to lift. The vapor only deepened, visibility dropping to almost nothing. Nathan's Sharingan flared as he probed the haze. Beneath the heat and moisture, he detected a faint undercurrent of water nature chakra, leaked deliberately into the air. Someone had turned his own element against him, shrouding the battlefield in a deadly, lingering fog. Nathan recognized the signs immediately. Kakuzu was slipping away using the water escape hidden mist technique. In all his past lives' memories, Nathan had never seen Kakuzu employ that jutsu before. Yet the veteran shinobi was old enough and cunning enough to master even the most widespread techniques. If he'd learned water release ninjutsu, there was no telling what other forbidden arts he might know. There was no point in trying a fair fight. To stay alive, Nathan had to overwhelm Kakuzu with sheer power. He shot through the seals with both hands, drawing in a vast reserve of chakra. Then he released the jutsu, wind escape, grand breakthrough. Instantly, the sky darkened as gusting winds spiraled into a towering tornado. White mist and debris whipped around the battlefield, tearing up the ground. In seconds, the storm collapsed inward, depositing a scene of utter ruin. The mist had vanished. Nathan swept his gaze across the desolation, but Kakuzu was nowhere to be seen. A chill prickled the back of his neck. Before he could react, 2 gigantic palms burst from the cracked earth and clamped onto his ankles. "Got you," a guttural voice rumbled from below. Nathan's heart sank. He wouldn't get a second chance. Kakuzu's trap had already slammed shut. Nathan didn't hesitate. With a single sweeping arc of his long knife, he severed both of Kakuzu's arms at the shoulders. But no sooner did the limbs fall than thick, black tendrils, like blood vessels turned monstrous, sprang from the stumps. They writhed wildly through the air, searching for any target. Almost immediately, more of those same inky tentacles erupted from the ground below and laced through the ones in midair. In an instant, they fused into 2 fully formed arms once again. Nathan felt a jolt of shock at the grotesque sight, but he forced himself calm. He leapt backward 3 times, aiming to put distance between himself and the reassembled limbs. Kakuzu, however, refused to stay down. His new hands shot forward, palms gaping wide, eager to grasp Nathan out of the air. Without a moment's doubt, Nathan formed a hand seal and unleashed his ninjutsu, Fire Release, Fireball Jutsu. A colossal sphere of flame roared to life in front of him and barreled straight toward Kakuzu's outstretched hands. But Kakuzu's reformed palms weren't just strong, they were unnaturally nimble. With a single fluid twist, they dodged the fireball entirely, letting the searing inferno crash harmlessly into the ground beside them. Plumes of smoke and cinders filled the air as Kakuzu's hands glided back toward Nathan, ready to attack once more. Nathan fell back once more. As he did, his fingers wove through a series of hand seals, and he unleashed his ninjutsu, Wind Release, Wind Blade. In an instant, a translucent razor of wind whistled off his outstretched palms and bore down on his opponent's hands at lightning speed. Tear, like cloth rent apart, both palms were severed cleanly by the blade. Thanks to his Sharingan's heightened perception, Nathan had anticipated the moment the wind slashes would arrive and noted his adversary's frantic evasive maneuver. Still, even that split-second attempt came too late. Wind Release. Windblade is famed for its blistering speed. When combined with the predictive edge of the Sharingan, it was virtually unstoppable. Yet what happened next? The odd, almost imperceptible shift in the two detached palms stopped him cold. Chapter 312, Fierce Battle. Black tendrils snaked out from the four severed palms, two pairs intertwining until they fused back into two whole hands. Nathan had assumed those inky threads were only adept at stitching limbs together. Now he realized they could even reattach a palm cleft in half. By the same logic, if Kakuzu himself were cut to pieces, he'd simply regenerate. It was no wonder he'd come to be known, alongside his partner, as one of the legendary immortal duo. With regeneration like that, he was scarcely human anymore. Nathan's heart raced as the restored palms lunged for him. This time, he refused to dodge. Calmly, he drew his long sword and called upon his perfected level 7-0 swordsmanship. In a single fluid stroke, the two hands were severed into countless fragments once more. Nathan's sword flashed in a blur, intercepting the writhing black tentacles before they could pierce him. Each strike was precise, driving the shadowy limbs back again and again. Frustrated, Kakuzu abandoned his concealment. The ground trembled as he burst upward, ripping open the heavy black robe that had hidden his form. Beneath it, his body was a horrifying patchwork of stitches, countless scars crisscrossing his skin as though he'd been cut to pieces and sewn back together. Worse still, 4 grotesque masks were grafted to his back, fused to his flesh. Nathan recognized them instantly as the hearts Kakuzu had stolen with his forbidden secret technique, heart capture. Each mask housed one of the stolen hearts, and each one granted Kakuzu a new lease on life. Until all 4 masks and Kakuzu's true heart were destroyed, the man before him could not be killed. Kakuzu turned his head slowly, eyes glinting a strange, sickly green. "You don't seem the least bit shocked by my transformation. Why?" Nathan sheathed his sword with a single fluid motion and offered a calm, confident smile, but he said nothing. He was already planning his next move. Nathan's pulse spiked as Kakuzu snarled to himself, "Don't tell me. Fine, I'll deal with this after I kill you." "Drink!" An eerie, guttural cry tore the air. Without warning, the fusion between the mask and Kakuzu's back split apart. Out of the rift shot dozens of inky black tentacles that writhed and coiled until they solidified into 4 immense humanoid figures. Each bore a distinct mask atop its head, and even from across the clearing, Nathan could sense their chakra signatures. Wind, fire, lightning, water. Earth must be the 5th, he realized with a jolt. With a violent shudder, Kakuzu severed the last of the tendrils linking him to these creations, granting them independent movement. Now, 5 masked beasts, each wielding a different elemental nature, circled him in silent coordination. He tightened his grip on the kunai at his belt. Surrounded and outnumbered, Nathan knew he couldn't wait for them to strike. He sprang into action, fingers weaving a taut seal. Wind Release, Wind Blade. A razor-sharp gale roared to life in his palm, slicing through the tension as he launched his first attack. Nathan exhaled, and in the blink of an eye, unleashed a translucent wind blade aimed straight at the thunder-masked creature. He'd hoped to catch his opponent off guard, using his elemental advantage to shatter one of Kakuzu's many hearts. But Kakuzu's years of combat experience kicked in the moment he recognized Nathan's wind release, Wind Blade. At the last second, he seized control of the thunder creature and jerked it out of the blade's path. The attack dissipated uselessly, and Nathan's jaw tightened in frustration. Kakuzu, too, wore a dark frown. "You really know a lot about me," he admitted, his voice edged with grudging respect. By targeting the masked monster instead of himself, Nathan had revealed that those creatures weren't simple summons but extensions of his power, information most warriors would never glean. Normally, an enemy would assume such a beast was just a decoy and aim straight for the summoner's heart, hoping to finish him in one blow. But Nathan locked onto the masked creatures at once. These were the very thunder attribute beasts that Feng Dun feared most. His instantaneous reaction the moment they appeared made it clear even to Kakuto that Nathan's mastery ran far deeper than anyone had expected. A dangerous thought flickered through Kakuto's mind, but the veteran ninja quickly stamped it down. Overthinking now could only play into his opponent's hands. With a sharp command, Kakuto directed all 4 flying thunder beasts to close in on Nathan. In moments, they formed a deadly ring around him. Z's electric arcs crackled through the air. A brilliant flash lit up the sky as the lead creature's jaws opened wide, hurling a jagged lightning spear toward Nathan. Crackle! Thunder boomed, and bolts of crackling energy surged from every side, converging on him at once. Nathan was ready. As soon as the masked water monster unleashed its lightning escape jutsu, he vanished in an instant with the instant body technique, reappearing mere feet away. He barely had time to steady himself before the creature spat out massive, cannonball-like spheres of water. Reacting on instinct, Nathan leapt aside, the torrent narrowly missing him thanks to the Sharingan's piercing clarity. Kakuzu, unperturbed, shifted his control to the wind attribute monster. It swooped in beside Nathan, mouth gaping, and unleashed a B-rank ninjutsu, wind style. Pressure. A savage gale roared outward, buffeting Nathan from every direction. His Sharingan spun, charting every ebb and swell of wind chakra in the air. Finding a narrow pocket where the pressure was weakest, he twisted his body and slipped into it, using the beast's own force to hurl himself far from its jaws and toward the ground below. But even that desperate dodge was only a momentary reprieve. The raw power of wind style, pressure, far exceeded what Nathan had just evaded, and he knew the true assault was only beginning. But even as the violent gales slammed into the earth, the shockwaves still knocked Nathan off his feet, sending chunks of soil and gravel hurtling toward him. He weaved and rolled, narrowly avoiding every flying fragment, until at last he slipped beyond the ninjutsu's lethal radius. Around him, the jungle he'd already cleared with his own Nile. Wind style, great breakthrough lay shredded once more. A low, triumphant voice echoed through the clearing. "Incredible! You're the first shinobi to break free from our combined assault." Nathan froze. Those were the same words once lavished on Kakashi. How could they apply to him? He forced himself to stand, breathing steadily. The truth was undeniable. The enemy's combo had been devastating. His escape wasn't luck. It was the Sharingan, whose inscrutable gaze tracked every swirl of dust and every ricocheting stone. His own skills weren't to be underestimated either. Had anyone else been in his place, they would have fallen the moment the wind attribute mask monster unleashed its full power, long before that first gale struck. After all, every jutsu Kakuzu used to animate those masked beasts was a high-level technique, even the simplest one ranked at B-level difficulty. Although there isn't a direct link between a jutsu's elemental nature and its difficulty, the harder a ninjutsu is to learn, the more devastating its power can be. With Kakuzu's immense chakra reserves fueling each technique, their destructive potential becomes clear. Yet even under such overwhelming force, Nathan slipped aside with lightning reflexes, a feat worthy of praise. He barely registered the compliment. His mind remained fixed on one goal: finish off this opponent and rejoin the battle as fast as possible. Chapter 313. Tangled. Bracing himself, Nathan gathered a surge of wind escape chakra, channeling it into his long sword and wrapping its currents around his body. A pale green glow shimmered along the blade as he unleashed the instant sword technique. He hadn't dared use it often. His old short sword was too damaged, but now that he wielded a powerful new weapon, he wouldn't hold back. In an instant, Nathan blurred into a residual image and reappeared at the flank of the nearest water attribute masked monster, just as it prepared a surprise attack. With lightning precision, he slashed at its mask, the creature's vital point. If the mask shattered, the monster would die, and Kakuzu's reign of terror would end. But at the critical moment, thick black tentacles erupted from the creature's flesh, twisting together into a living barricade that intercepted Nathan's blade. A jarring resistance rattled his arm as steel met sinew. He felt the full force of the obstruction, and recognized that his strike had been thwarted. Nathan grunted as his knife bit into the creature's flesh, only to meet resistance, as if he were cutting through rubber. Before he could adjust, a sharp crack tore through the air. The lightning-attributed masked construct sprang beside him, spitting a jagged bolt of electricity straight at his chest. Nathan twisted aside, the bolt dancing harmlessly past. Reacting instantly, he wove a series of hand seals. "Wind style, wind blade," he intoned. A translucent blade of razor-sharp wind shot forward, aiming to cleave the masked construct in two. With inhuman grace, the creature pivoted and let the wind blade whistle past its back. From across the battlefield, Kakuzu's harsh laugh rang out. He stamped the ground once, shifting his own seals, and the earth at his feet split open. A second masked construct emerged, its cracked mask gleaming red in the torchlight. It roared, exhaling a glowing fireball that grew into a towering inferno the moment it struck the ground. Scorching heat rippled outward, setting the grass ablaze and filling the air with roaring flames. Nathan's eyes widened. He leapt back, scrambling clear of the encroaching wall of fire. Finding space, he knelt and formed another set of seals. Water style, water array wall. A curving barricade of swirling water sprang up, clashing with the fiery onslaught. Steam hissed as scalding heat met liquid barrier, but Nathan's jutsu held firm, shielding him from the worst of the flames. He pressed a hand against the misty wall, readying himself for Kakuzu's next move, determined to turn the tide of battle in his favor. Nathan knew he couldn't hope to defeat these four abominations without resorting to his Mangekyo Sharingan. With it sealed, his arsenal was reduced to the three basic elemental jutsu, water, fire, and wind, plus his swordsmanship and genjutsu. His blade was lethal against ordinary shinobi. One clean cut to their fragile bodies was usually enough, but these monsters were another matter entirely. Each beast's only real vulnerability lay in the mask covering its head. Slash them elsewhere, and the wound barely fazed them. They simply retracted or braced a tentacle, like the water-type creature had done, to shield the mask. In such moments, Nathan's swordplay counted for almost nothing. Genjutsu was equally futile. These were mindless puppets bound by Kakuzu's will, incapable of perceiving or reacting to illusions. And ninjutsu offered no easy solution. His repertoire was already limited, and the elemental disadvantages stacked against him. Every fire jutsu sputtered when countered by wind, every wind technique dissipated before the water beast's swirling currents, and every water attack hissed away under the fire creature's scorching aura. On top of that, the elemental restraints cut his jutsu's potency in half. Struggling to find an opening, Nathan realized he needed more than raw power. He needed a completely new approach if he hoped to survive this fight. Nathan sifted through his analysis, piecing together three crucial observations. First, under norm, all circumstances, he was utterly outmatched by Kakuzu. Unless he struck the man's body directly, he had no hope. Second, without that opening, all he could do was stall for time and search for a weakness. And third, Kakuzu's own tactics left him little opportunity to act. Every time Nathan attempted to close the distance, Kakuzu unleashed those four masked constructs to intercept him. Even if he somehow forced his way through, how could he land a damaging blow? Kakuzu's heart element was earth, allowing him to perform the earth-style, earth spear in an instant. Any ordinary physical strike would be meaningless against such a defense. Among all ninjutsu, only lightning style could threaten an earth heart, but Nathan hadn't learned a single lightning technique. Left with no direct counter, Nathan craved an alternative strategy, but time was running out. Given Kakuzu's lightning-quick reflexes, any surprise move would have at best a 50-50 chance of success. And this wasn't the overconfident Kakuzu that Naruto and his comrades faced later. This one had clearly studied Nathan's skills and was determined to avoid a head-on clash at all costs. Nathan immediately regretted revealing just how much he knew about Kakuzu at the outset of their duel. Even calling his odds 50-50 was an understatement. His memories from a past life had led him to dismiss Kakuzu as merely okay, but meeting him in combat proved just how wrong he'd been. Think back to Kakuzu's clash with Naruto and the other Kage-level shinobi. On paper it might look like he struggled, but losing his water-style mask to Kakashi's ambush, and then having his earth-style heart destroyed by Shikamaru and Hidan, only shifted the tide temporarily. It was Naruto's chance wind-style Rasen Shuriken that truly ended the fight. Otherwise, who knows how it would have turned out. Now Nathan was facing Kakuzu at full strength, fully alert, and infinitely more dangerous than his memories had ever suggested. Nathan could feel the weight of the challenge before him. Without unleashing his Mangekyo Sharingan, there was no way he could stand toe-to-toe with his adversary. Yet activating that forbidden eye came with its own risks. If he failed to finish the job instantly and let his opponent slip away, he'd find himself in serious trouble. As a veteran shinobi who had survived since the Warring States era, Nathan knew far too well the pitfalls of the Sharingan, especially its Mangekyo form. He'd witnessed it firsthand, and he knew that using it recklessly would almost certainly tip off any opponent. If they recognized the telltale pattern of his eyes, they'd immediately know his secrets. And once that happened, every piece of Nathan's hidden past would be laid bare, a nightmare he couldn't afford. While Nathan wrestled with these doubts, Kakuzu had already unleashed 4 masked constructs that bore down on him relentlessly. Elemental jutsu crackled through the air, shadow clones surged forward, and the masked figures attacked in perfect, coordinated waves. Shaking his head to clear the distractions, Nathan locked his focus on the incoming onslaught. There would be no hesitation now, only decisive action to survive this gauntlet and protect the secrets he'd fought so long to keep. Nathan seized the moment and lunged in front of Kakuzu, channeling chakra just as he had seen Naruto do. With a crisp formation of hand seals, he unleashed wind-style, Rasen Shuriken, a spiraling sphere of chakra imbued with countless microscopic blades. He aimed to end the fight in a single decisive strike. Kakuzu had boasted of 5 hearts, and thus 5 extra lives, but even that wouldn't save him from this attack. The Rasen Shuriken's fine chakra needles ravage the body at the cellular level. By the time a new heart is grafted in, the victim can no longer circulate chakra. They remain alive in name only, powerless and broken. All Nathan's relentless training paid off. His wind style, Rasen Shuriken had advanced from rank 1, 100-200, to rank 3, 174,000, a testament to his growing skill. At this level of mastery, it was more than just a flashy trick. It was a genuinely lethal weapon. Chapter 314. Counterattack. Thunder cracked, lightning slashed through the gloom, and for several breathless minutes the clearing was transformed into a maelstrom of wind blades, roaring fireballs, and cascading spheres of water. Kakuzu's 4 masked beasts streaked forward in perfect unison, hurling wave after wave of elemental assaults at Nathan. But Nathan's Sharingan blazed to life, granting him uncanny insight into every attack. He drifted through the storm of destruction with fluid grace, sidestepping razor-sharp gusts and dancing clear of scalding flames and churning water. Every time a monster left itself vulnerable, Nathan struck back with lightning-fast counters that forced Kakuzu to scramble for defense. Finally, after dodging yet another furious barrage, Nathan sensed the tide shift. With a low, snarling growl, Kakuzu unleashed his fiercest transformation. "Earth Grudge Mode," he bellowed, as the black sutures crisscrossing his body split apart like brittle glass. From each rupture sprang writhing tentacles of pure darkness, intertwining into colossal limbs that pulsed with malevolent life. The air itself seemed to recoil as more tendrils burst from his gaping maw, lashing the sky in a frenzy of shadowy strikes. Nathan's eyes narrowed. This was no half measure. Kakuzu had gone all out. He crouched into a battle stance, Sharingan swirling, every muscle primed for the onslaught. The real fight was only just beginning. Nathan wasted no time. He formed the required hand seals and unleashed the water release, water dragon bullet technique against the fire attribute masked beast. Unfortunately, even though he'd advanced the technique to level 3, 101-1000, it still demanded 44 seals, far too many to execute quickly. By the time he finished the last seal and sent the torrent of water hurtling forward, another masked beast had already stepped in front of its fire-wielding ally to block the attack. In an instant, lightning crackled across the clearing. A dazzling thunder serpent erupted from the second beast's maw, coiling around Nathan's water dragon. Bolts of electricity raced along the watery form toward him. Realizing he'd be fried if he stayed rooted in place, Nathan had no choice but to cancel his jutsu mid-cast. He slammed his foot into the ground, vaulting backward to put distance between himself and the lightning. But Kakuzu wasn't about to give him a break. He continued to puppeteer the thunder-masked beast, forcing it to unleash another thunder escape technique in Nathan's direction. Caught off guard, Nathan had to scramble to dodge yet again. Nathan's attack subsided for only a moment before he realized two masked beasts had grafted themselves onto Kakuzu's shoulders. One the fire attribute fiend he'd targeted earlier, the other a wind attribute monster. From a distance, Kakuzu's tentacles writhed and propelled him skyward. Mid-air, he molded a hand seal, drew in an immense reserve of chakra, and hissed down at Nathan. "This ends now." At his command, the two shoulder masks split open their maws and unleashed their jutsu in unison. Fire release, hell furnace, and wind release, great pressure. The flames and gale force winds collided overhead, merging into a single, devastating technique, flame wind and waves. As the old saying goes, fire steals strength from wind, and wind drives fire ever higher. Bound together, the two elements became far more powerful than their individual sums, rivaling many A-rank and even some S-rank ninjutsu. A torrential cascade of scorching fire erupted from the sky, setting the night ablaze. Below, Nathan found no cover, only the seething inferno closing in around him. "No!" Nathan's roar caught in his throat. He summoned a wall of water that shimmered into existence before him, but it did nothing to halt the roaring inferno. In an instant, the fire overwhelmed him, consuming his body in white-hot flames. Kakuzu's expression, so stoic it might have been carved in stone, finally softened into a grin of relief. He'd underestimated Nathan's power. At a mere 17 million, Tails' bounty, Nathan fought like a target worth twice as much. Kakuzu cursed his lost profit margin and wondered if he could bill the black market for the difference. Before he could dwell on that thought, a harsh, grinding sound slashed through the air behind him. "What?" he hissed, but didn't dare look back. Instantly, he wove his dark tendrils into a thick, fleshy barrier at his rear. Still, an oppressive sense of exposure pressed down on him, as if a blade hovered just inches from his spine. Reacting on pure instinct, Kakuzu finished the seals. "Earth, release. Earth spear," he intoned, channeling chakra into the ground beneath his feet as he prepared his strongest defensive ninjutsu. Nathan knew the invisible edge slicing toward him was a wind release attack. With his Earth Spear barrier primed, he was convinced he could block it without trouble. Yet before he could react, a searing pain ripped through him. It felt as though the grotesque wall of churning tentacles behind him had been sundered by unseen blades, and a wave of hostile chakra washed over his body, pinning his limbs in place. Needles of agony shot through him like white-hot pins driving into his flesh. "Ah!" Even Kakuzu couldn't contain his cry as that excruciating torment struck. This was undoubtedly wind release, spiral shuriken. In the same instant, reality snapped back a few seconds to when Nathan had been engulfed by the towering inferno. He had activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and unleashed its left eye ability, Heavenly Control. With that technique, he slipped outside the temporal flow of the ninja world, existing in two realms at once, unharmed by the flames that had threatened to consume him. And in that suspended moment, he found the opening he'd been waiting for. The fiery onslaught that swept toward Kakuzu was never meant to finish him. It was a ruse designed to draw down his guard. Even someone as circumspect as he could afford a momentary lapse, and that was all Nathan needed. As the sea of flames roared around his opponent, Kakuzu relaxed ever so slightly. In that instant, Nathan struck. He vanished from view, reappearing behind Kakuzu in the blink of an eye. Drawing upon his summoned heavenly guardian, he wove his chakra into the shape of a colossal spinning disc and unleashed the forbidden wind style, Rasen Shuriken. At such close quarters, Kakuzu had no chance to dodge. He could only plant his feet and try to withstand the assault. But the Rasen Shuriken was an S-rank jutsu, Its slicing wind effortlessly shredded the monster's tentacle-like flesh armor that had withstood even the legendary Kusanagi blade. Then, with surgical precision, billions of microscopic wind blades ripped into his body on a cellular level. Nathan watched in silent focus as torrents of wind chakra whipped around Kakuzu, tearing him apart from the inside out. The carnage was swift and absolute. He stood motionless, waiting for the final echoes of the technique to fade before he moved again. After a few breaths, a thunderous bang echoed as Kakuzu plummeted from the sky, slamming into Nathan's feet. Crack! Crack! Two sharp snaps rang out as the heart masks on Kakuzu's shoulders fractured, their black tendrils curling and withering away. The blows didn't just destroy the masks, they ripped his heart apart. When his body hit the ground, his heart beat for only a single breath before falling completely still. But Kakuzu was far from defeated. Through a churning sea of flames, Nathan watched the two disembodied masks race toward him. Rather than intercept them, he let them merge back into Kakuzu's body. Moments later, a battered chest rose and fell, the heart resumed its beat, and a strained glimmer returned to his eyes. Yet power eluded him. The wind style, Rasen Shuriken, had shattered Kakuzu's chakra network beyond repair. No number of lives could undo that level of damage. Nathan activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and saw the black tendrils weaving into Kakuzu's wounds, painstakingly reconstructing flesh, bone, and torn chakra channels. In other words, if Nathan chose to stand down, Kakuzu would heal given time, and soon enough be able to fight again. Nathan allowed himself a brief, sardonic thought. Perhaps Kakuzu had already collapsed moments before, unable to endure any longer. He didn't know the details, nor did he much care. A high-pitched squeak rang out as he drew his long sword. His breath came in steady puffs as he squared his shoulders and steadied his grip. Then, with surgical precision, he lunged. Twin blades flashed through the air, slicing cleanly through the last remaining mask and piercing straight into Kakuzu's heart. In that instant, the immortal shinobi finally fell silent, and Nathan's mission was complete. Chapter 315, Return. Nathan knelt beside Kakuzu's still body, the forest's damp air pressing in around him. In this forgotten corner of the world, a ninja, one of the greatest to ever walk this earth, had met his end in complete silence. Nathan felt a chill at the thought. One day could he suffer the same fate, unremembered and alone. He shook off the dark idea. He had sworn to transcend mortality and live forever. There was no room for doubt. Focusing his will, Nathan set aside his fears and scanned his surroundings. With Kakuzu's chakra gone, the inferno of his compound ninjutsu, Flame Windwave, was already dying back. Yet hundreds of trees still smoldered, the blaze spreading through the undergrowth. Fortunately, this part of the jungle was so humid that the flames couldn't sustain themselves. Eventually, the heat would trigger a sudden downpour, extinguishing every ember. There was nothing left to do here. The roar of the fire and the distant thunder of the storm gathering overhead were more than enough noise. Nathan rose to his feet, heart still racing, and stepped away from the wreckage, determined to put as much distance between himself and this haunted clearing as possible. He located the heart of the blaze, heaved Kakuzu's corpse into the fiercest flames, and then slipped away. By the next evening, Nathan stood on the treetops overlooking the coast. All he had to do now was cross the strait into the land of waves and then return to the forward base, but he wasn't in any rush. After more than 10 hours of nonstop pursuit, he needed a break. As the sun dipped below the horizon, staining the sea in shades of blood orange and deep purple, Nathan allowed his thoughts to wander. Since dispatching Kakuzu, his luck had taken an unexpected turn. He'd been certain other bounty hunters would swarm after him. 17 million taels was enough to tempt even the most cautious shinobi into risking their lives. But the journey back had been strangely uneventful. Not a single rival had shown up. No traps, no ambushes. Then again, come to think of it, every ninja who had crossed paths with him that day had ended up dead. Perhaps that, more than anything else, was the reason his trip home remained undisturbed. Nathan's jaw tightened as he considered the danger closing in on him. Bounty ninjas wouldn't surface out of nowhere unless someone had put out a hit on him. And sure enough, his face and reward were plastered across every wanted poster in the region. Sooner or later, a tracker would pick up his trail. He'd completed his assignment with ruthless efficiency. Each of his targets lay dead, their deaths disguised as accidents. Yet despite his careful planning, there was one piece of evidence he couldn't erase: the Kusanagi sword he'd taken from the elderly leader of Takumi village. A blade that famous couldn't stay hidden for long. Once he used it again, whispers of the stolen relic would amplify his notoriety until everyone from rival clans to underworld brokers recognized the sword, and by extension, its wielder. Nathan knew the black market had long had its eye on the Takumi village. The moment someone spotted the Kusanagi in his hands, all it would take was a glance at the wanted posters to connect the dots. And the black market wouldn't hesitate to hire more bounty ninjas, or even send their own agents to bring him in. They'd take pleasure in settling scores. After all, Nathan had crossed them. Faced with mounting enemies and a growing bounty, he weighed his options. He could keep fighting, relying on speed and skill to stay one step ahead, but eventually numbers would overwhelm him. Or he could bury the Kusanagi sword until the heat died down. Stashing it in a remote cache would cost him the advantage of its uncanny sharpness, but it might just save his life. He sheathed the blade, the metal sliding home with a soft click. For now, discretion was the better part of valor. Tomorrow, he'd slip the Kusanagi into hiding and vanish before the bounty ninjas knew exactly where to find him. Nathan had invested too much to let that finely forged blade go unused. It wasn't just some illicit weapon from the black market, nor was he intimidated by a handful of bounty ninjas. As the old saying goes, when the enemy advances, the general stands firm. When the tide rises, the embankment holds. What happened next? You'll find out soon enough. With that resolve, Nathan dropped from the treetop and landed lightly on a sturdy branch. He laid the long sword across his knees and closed his eyes, letting himself rest. Minutes drifted by until at last the sun slipped beneath the sea and darkness spread across the land. When the moment was right, Nathan opened his eyes. He held his breath for a heartbeat, then dived toward the coast. With barely a ripple, he slipped past several Konoha patrol boats. Once clear of their watchful eyes, he rose from the waves, regained his footing on the water's surface, and set off toward the Land of Waves forward outpost. Fortunately, the coastline of the Land of Fire is extensive. As long as he kept roughly to course, Nathan could step ashore anywhere along the shore without worrying about precise navigation. The Land of Waves is deceptively small. Its shores and reefs can make even the surest traveler lose his bearings. Nathan pressed on toward Konoha's forward base, eyes trained on the tangled coastline, unaware that danger was already bearing down on him from the east. Far out at sea, several great warships cleaved through the surf, their prow waves churning white. Hull markings and the turbulent wakes left no doubt. These were vessels of the Hidden Mist village, each packed with elite mist ninja. After more than 10 days of uneasy silence, the mist had finally made their move. Their target was bold and direct, to strike Konoha's forward base deep within the Land of Waves. Nathan, hours away on land, had no inkling of the naval armada closing in. Some miles east of the Land of Waves, roughly 10 kilometers from the forward base, a lone watchtower perched atop a jagged reef. Its single Konoha sentry, shrouded in the salt spray mist, scanned the horizon with mounting alarm. Suddenly he stiffened, brought a whistle to his lips, and blew a sharp, piercing note that cut through the dawn air. Within moments, the frantic patter of boots sounded on the spiral stair. A member of Konoha's special forces careened onto the platform, cloak whipping in the wind, chakra flaring beneath his vest. His eyes met the sentry's with urgent understanding. The mist had come to strike. Nathan strode onto the ridge and called out, "Quartz, what's happening?" The Chunin who'd just sounded his whistle snapped to attention. "Hidden Mist Village warships. They're approaching." "How many?" Nathan's tone was calm but urgent. 4. Nathan let out a short breath. In past encounters, 4 mist warships could each carry 50 to 80 shinobi, 200 to 300 in total. That matched the entire force we had stationed at this forward base. If they'd caught us by surprise, the outcome could have been disastrous. But now that we detected them early, we had the advantage of warning. "Which direction?" Nathan asked. "Southeast," Quartz pointed out over the dark waters. Nathan took the monocular from Quartz and raised it to his eye. By the silver light of the moon, He picked out 4 massive hulls sliding through the calm sea. He lowered the scope and met Quartz's gaze. "All right, notify the perimeter squads, prepare defenses, and send word back to Konoha immediately. We'll hold them off here." Quartz nodded and hurried away, while Nathan turned back to the dark horizon, already planning their next move. The night swallowed their fleet whole, the ships drifting across the waves like dark phantoms. Nathan knew they weren't haunted vessels. They were simply running blacked out, every lamp doused, in hopes of slipping past Konoha's lookouts. But luck was against them. During Kirigakure's recent lull, Konoha had quietly erected a new reef watchtower, one that hadn't appeared on any of Kirigakure's intelligence maps. Before Nathan's squadron could close in, a beacon flared to life atop that hidden outpost, casting their stealthy advance into stark relief. Chapter 316, The Mission. Nathan lowered his monocular after a careful scan of the enemy encampment. He paused, weighing his options, then bit his thumb and let a single drop of blood fall between his palms. Bringing his hands together, he wove them through the 5 seals, Hai, Shu, Shen, Wei, and called forth the spiritual summoning technique. In an instant, azure smoke spiraled outward, and a slender white crane materialized before him. Nathan wasted no time. He drew a brush from his belt, inscribed a terse, critical message on a piece of parchment, and slipped it into the letter tube fastened to the bird's leg. With a firm pat on its back, he whispered, "Heshan, fly at once to the forward base. Deliver this safely." The crane let out a sharp cry of acknowledgement, flexed its mighty wings, and shot into the sky like an arrow. Nathan watched until the bird was no more than a speck against the clouds, then exhaled, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. Captain Alara turned to Quartz and the arriving Konoha shinobi. "Our reinforcements from the base will be here soon. In the meantime, everyone keep a sharp eye on the enemy. I want constant surveillance." "Yes, Captain." The Konoha ninjas snapped to attention and fell into their assigned positions. Moments later, earth trembled beneath them, a warning echoing through the earthen walls. Back at the hidden base, an ear-splitting alarm jolted awake Nathan's shadow clone. The clone's eyes snapped open. This was bad. A breathless Chunin messenger burst into the chamber. "Chunin, Nathan!" "The meeting room, now!" The clone didn't hesitate. With a ripple of ink-dark chakra, it vanished and reappeared in the central briefing hall. Behind him, every Jonin on duty filed in, the red and black banners of the Uchiha clan fluttering overhead. Standing at the head of the long table was Uchiha Torin, his Sharingan eyes blazing with urgency. Without preamble, he spoke. "Recon reports confirm an imminent assault by the Mist Shinobi. They're converging on our perimeter within the hour." He didn't pause for questions. Instead, he began distributing scrolls and issuing orders in rapid succession, his voice clipped and precise. When he finished, he fixed Nathan's clone with a stern look. "Nathan, I'm here." The shadow clone rose to its feet, cloak of darkness swirling around it. The real Nathan, somewhere beyond this duplicate, hung in the balance, ready to act on his clone's every move. The Uchiha Jonin stood and addressed Nathan directly. "You'll lead the 1st and 2nd squads. Move out at once and make for Sentry Tower 3 as quickly as possible. That's your mission." He tossed a scroll toward Nathan. Nathan's shadow clone caught it in midair, broke the seal, and scanned the orders. A relieved breath escaped the clone's lips before it neatly refolded the parchment and bowed. "Yes, Captain." "Good," the Jonin said, nodding. "Get down there and prepare." "Understood." Nathan slipped out of the meeting room immediately. Behind him, the Jonin's voice rose again, assigning tasks to the remaining team leaders. One by one, they stood, acknowledged their orders, and left, some wearing excited smiles, others solemn frowns. But Nathan paid them no mind. He was already on his way with the 2 most elite squads. Sentry Tower 3, known as the Reef Tower, was guarded by Kanda Yinghe and lay closest to the Mist Ninja warship. By sending Nathan, and the finest soldiers at his disposal, to this pivotal post, the Uchiha Jonin had made it clear he placed great trust in Nathan's abilities. Nathan's shadow clone inwardly bristled at the praise. After all, he wasn't the original, so how could he possibly possess such strength? But sitting in the meeting room, he couldn't protest, so he swallowed his pride and accepted the commendation. Luckily, his orders didn't call for a full-scale engagement with the Hidden Mist assault force. The Uchiha Jonin laid out 2 clear objectives: First, if the Mist Ninja discover Sentry Tower number 3 and attack, the clone's job is to delay them, buy at least 10 Inutes for the main base to fortify its defenses. Second, if the Mist Ninja either fail to find their position or pass right by, then the clone must trail the enemy from a distance, wait until the Mist Force and the base begin fighting, and then launch a rear assault, striking in concert with the defenders. According to the latest report from Kanda Yinga, the 4 hidden Mist warships are clearly aiming at the forward base. That means a straight-up delaying action is unlikely, but it also gives Nathan's team plenty of room to maneuver. With the enemy's attention fixed elsewhere, they'll have the freedom to strike when and where it counts. Though Nathan felt little personal attachment to his ninja under his command, he would never deliberately send them to their deaths. He accepted this mission precisely because there was still a sliver of hope for retreat if things went south, an insurance policy. Otherwise, despite the inevitable suspicion his involvement would raise, he would simply have refused. He had yet another reason for taking the assignment. By his calculations, the main force should be returning any moment. If the skirmish dragged on just a bit longer, reinforcements from the Hidden Mist village would arrive to tip the scales. At that point, any complications could be smoothed over firsthand. 20 minutes later, Nathan approached the Reef Sentry Tower, leading 2 squads, 35 men in all. Standing atop the wooden platform was Kanda Yinge, his expression shifting from guarded to eager the moment he spotted Nathan. Word of the ghost sword of Hidden Mist had been trickling through the village ever since Nathan's small squad had slipped behind enemy lines. Though the Hidden Mist elders had ordered a cautious withdrawal in recent days, limiting Nathan's chance to prove himself in open battle, his reputation was already growing. Now, at last, circumstances might finally give him the stage he needed. Despite the risk, word spread almost overnight of Nathan's ambush by Hidden Mist's elite troopers as he raced to reinforce the front lines, and how he cut down several of their jonin in the process. Rumor even had it that 2 members of the notorious 7 ninja swordsmen fell to his blade, only adding to the awe surrounding him. Naturally, the Uchiha clan wasted no time amplifying the story. As one of Konoha's wealthiest families, they're always hungry for prestige, and Nathan's feats fit their ambitions perfectly. They've poured resources into building his legend, and in turn, into him. Nathan is no fool. He understands the trade-off. Reputation can be a burden, but expertly handled, it's a blade that clears every obstacle. Just look at Commander Kanda Yinge. The moment he heard Nathan's name, he entrusted him with command without hesitation. As for the danger of drawing even more attention from foreign ninjas, well, Nathan's record already marks him as a prime target. Publicizing his success won't make things worse. If anything, it only cements his status as a force they can't ignore. And that, Nathan knows, is part of the game. Nathan understood all too well that the 5 great shinobi villages shared one unspoken strategy: eliminate each other's most gifted ninja. War wasn't fought only on the front lines, it was waged in the shadows. Crippling a rival village in secret ensured that, even if they survived this conflict, they'd stand little chance in the next. So believing he could slip by unnoticed was sheer folly. His reputation had already spread, and the Uchiha clan's carefully planted rumors only fueled every other village's suspicions. Only by growing stronger could he withstand their relentless scrutiny and underhanded attacks. Fortunately, long before his name became known, Nathan had quietly awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, a trump card he could unleash when the moment was right. Now, fame was no burden, but an opportunity to show just how formidable he'd become. As these thoughts raced through his mind, he lifted his gaze to Kanda Yinge standing before him. Chapter 317, Backhand. How do things look now? Nathan asked Kanda Yinge. Kanda Yinge handed him the monocular. All 4 warships are still pressing forward, he reported. They seem intent on attacking the forward base. Nathan nodded and raised the scope to his eye. The moon hung low and bright over the sea, casting a silver path that led straight to Kirigakure village. Through the lens, he could just make out the silhouettes of the warships as they neared the Reef Sentry Tower. But instead of steering directly toward the post, they swung off at an angle, cutting in the direction of the Wave Kingdom's advance base. Just as Yinghe had predicted, Their target was clear. Nathan's orders were simple. Let the battle erupt, then strike from the rear. Hit them where they least expect it, and buy as much time as possible. Every minute he delayed their assault increased the chances of his own safe return, and so he would stall them for as long as he could. Nathan's thoughts froze as dark figures sprang from the deck of the nearest ship. He snatched up his monocular and activated his Sharingan. While the dojutsu wasn't renowned for long-range clarity, his honed insight let him see straight through the night haze. "Mist ninjas," he breathed. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Were they heading this way? Sure enough, the shinobi seemed to walk on water, strafing across the waves toward their little flotilla. From the other 3 ships, more mist ninjas launched themselves into the sea, converging until nearly 50 of them were advancing in unison. Nathan's jaw tensed. First Mate Kai, watching him grow pale, asked, "Captain, what is it?" "They found us," Nathan replied, voice low and sharp. Under the bright moonlight, the silhouetted figures kept coming, silent and determined. Nathan lifted the monocular again, eyes narrowing as he tracked the enemy's approach. Every passing second delivered 50 foe to face, and no option but to stand and fight. Nathan watched the enemy fleet press on toward the Kingdom of Waves and let out a quiet sigh of relief. Had they been seen as a genuine threat, the ships would have already turned back. 50 vessels might sound formidable, but in Konoha's hands, they were manageable. "Everyone, ready yourselves for combat," he ordered. "Sir, yes, Captain," the Konoha shinobi replied, springing into action. Before they moved out, Nathan raised a hand. "Hold on. Once we engage, our top priority is delay. Keep the Mist Ninja pinned down. Don't let them fall back and call for reinforcements. Buy time until those transports are well out of range, then strike with everything we've got and annihilate them." His directives were clear. Prevent the Mist forces from regrouping and summoning aid, and stall the enemy long enough for the transports to sail away. The squad understood immediately. "We've got it, Captain." Nathan gave a curt nod. "All right, move in and prepare. Don't worry about supporting the front lines. We'll handle this sector." With that, the Konoha team dispersed, each shinobi's expression locked in determined focus as they braced for the fight ahead. They had already held off an enemy whose numbers far outmatched their own. What more could they do? Leaving the battle to them alone wasn't an option. Nathan didn't fear whatever lay ahead. He only prayed the main force would return in time. A few minutes earlier, after hours of relentless travel, Nathan had finally crossed the strait into the land of waves. From there, he'd sprinted straight for the forward outpost. But as he drew near, something felt wrong. At midnight, the camp that should have been silent lay in a frenzy of activity. Torches burned bright as soldiers erected barricades, dug trenches, and readied weapons. In an instant, Nathan understood. The enemy was on its way. With his shadow clone unaccounted for, he dared not reveal himself. Instead, he slipped into his transformation technique and took on a new identity. Using his intimate knowledge of the outpost and perfect control over his chakra signature, he melted past the guards and made his way back to his quarters, unseen and unhindered. Nathan slid open the hidden drawer beneath his cot and withdrew a scrap of paper covered in meticulously penned Chinese characters. It was the Shadow Clone's mission dossier, his own emergency backup plan, drafted long ago for a crisis just like this. Evidently, his foresight hadn't been wasted. "Watchtower 3, are you running behind schedule?" he murmured. He gathered a sphere of fire chakra in his palm and watched the paper curl into ash before it even hit the ground. Without pausing, he slipped out of the base, skirted the outer perimeter until he reached a deserted stretch of coastline and dove into the churning sea. He swam until the salt water stung his lungs, then burst through the surface. Pushing off the waves, he literally ran across the water, angling himself toward Tower 3's blind side. 20 minutes later, Nathan crested a low swell and crept toward the tower's rocky outcropping. Even from a distance, he heard the clash of steel and shouted orders. The air itself quivered with surging chakra. His heart pounded at the thought that his shadow clone might already be faltering. He broke into a sprint, determined to arrive before it was too late. But before he'd taken 5 paces, a flash of memory slammed into him. He skidded to a stop, breath catching as vivid scenes raced through his mind. In that instant, every plan, every warning, every hidden contingency he'd prepared came flooding back. Unsurprisingly, the memories streamed in from his shadow clone. Nathan skimmed through the events of the past 3 days, then honed in on tonight's recollections, especially those from just before the fatal strike. After a moment, he snapped his eyes open and murmured, "It's her." On the other side of the field, Terumi May watched in awe as the smoky silhouette of Nathan's clone dissolved into the air. "A shadow clone," she gasped, scanning the shadows and crags around her for his true body. But no second figure emerged. In truth, it was Terumi May who had destroyed the clone. After 3 days of relentless activity, the duplicate's chakra reserves were nearly depleted. Against a fighter of her caliber, though still somewhat inexperienced in real combat, its weaknesses were brutally exposed. Blessed with 2 powerful bloodline limits and an enormous chakra supply, Terumi May had unleashed long-range, wide-area jutsu that the feeble clone simply couldn't withstand. As the final shockwaves swept over it, the phantasmal form shattered, leaving no trace of Nathan's likeness behind. Nathan's shadow clone fought desperately, trying to capitalize on its sword skills while avoiding its weaknesses. It darted forward, parrying Mei Terumi's ninjutsu at every turn, but it simply couldn't land a decisive strike. Although Mei's own combat record wasn't remarkable, she knew all too well the reputation of the ghost sword and refused to let her foe come within reach. Inch by inch, her precise blade work wore the clone down until, its chakra spent, it finally collapsed, exhausted and defeated. Chapter 318, Accident Swish. Mei Terumi spun at the sudden movement and found herself face to face with a mist ninja in his early 30s. His long, slate-blue hair framed a stern face, a dark cloth wrapped over his right eye, and a seal talisman dangled from each earlobe. Mei's heart skipped. This was Nathan, the Kirigakure elite jonin who'd stolen a Hyuga Byakugan on the battlefield months ago. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice low with urgency. Nathan didn't answer at once. He quietly peeled back the bandage from his covered eye, revealing the pale, pupilless glow of the stolen Byakugan. Its penetrating gaze could pierce illusions, detect the faintest chakra traces, and see across vast distances. Already, he'd used it to spot the shadow clone perched in the watchtower, Nathan's own decoy from his phantom blade technique. Mei's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "It was only your shadow clone that attacked me," she confirmed. She paused, scanning the surrounding trees for any sign of movement. "The real threat is still out there. Nathan, you have to locate his true body before he strikes again." Nathan nodded, the seriousness of the moment sharpening his features. With a slow inhale, he activated the Byakugan in full, the veins around his eye bulging as the world around him went translucent. "Got it," he murmured. "I'll find him." Together, the 2 shinobi braced themselves. The real battle was about to begin. Without hesitation, he centered his mind, drew in chakra, and activated the Byakugan beneath the black cloth. In an instant, every detail around him snapped into focus. The power to see through it all thrilled him, but he forced himself to stay on task and began seeking any trace of Nathan. 2 minutes passed. Fine beads of sweat formed on his forehead, and still he found nothing. When he reported this to Mei Terumi, she shook her head. "Impossible. He was right in my line of sight just moments ago. Even if he'd used a shadow clone to slip away, he couldn't have gone far. Unless..." "Unless what?" Ao asked from the side. Mei Terumi hesitated, brow furrowed. "Unless he was just a shadow clone the whole time." Ao blinked. At first the idea struck him as ridiculous, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was no other reasonable answer. There simply was no technique capable of hiding from the Byakugan otherwise. Ao frowned, staring at the silent air before him. As the Byakugan's proudest prize, his faith in its all-seeing gaze eclipsed that of any Hyuga clan ninja. He could not and would not believe that Nathan had evaded such scrutiny. If the missing figure on the battlefield had genuinely been Nathan, the Byakugan would have revealed him in an instant. The only answer, Ao concluded, was that it hadn't been Nathan at all, but one of his shadow clones. Yet even this raised a new puzzle. If so, where was Nathan's true body lurking? And could there be a deeper trap at work? While Ao wrestled with these questions, far to the south in Konoha, the mood among the people teetered between hope and despair. As their appointed captain, and under the legend-inspiring title Ghost Sword, Nathan was Konoha's most anticipated champion. Every movement he made was eyed in silence by countless onlookers. At first, however, the man they had pinned all their hopes on had failed to live up to the hype. He could not even pin down Terumi Mei, a notorious rogue shinobi whose reputation for tricks and feints was nearly as great as Nathan's. Their disappointment hardened into doubt when Terumi Mei not only evaded Nathan's blade, but struck him down outright. Word of Nathan's death spread like wildfire. Grief and anger roiled through the village. If their ghost sword had fallen, who would stand between them and the enemies now massing on their border? It felt as if Konoha's last bulwark had splintered. Then came the astonishing correction. It had not been Nathan himself who died, but simply one of his shadow clones. Relief washed over the villagers as they realized their champion yet walked among them. Mora rallied, and for a fleeting moment they dared to hope again. Yet the celebration remained uneasy and incomplete. Even as rumors of Nathan's survival trickled in, his true body was nowhere to be found, and every passing hour without him bred fresh anxiety. In the hush before the storm, the people of Konoha waited, reminded all too clearly that even ninjas, no matter how legendary, were still only human. Without a firm leader, the Konoha forces were unraveling, fear spreading from man to man. Terumi Mei recognized the opening immediately. With Nathan nowhere in sight, she shifted her entire assault onto the disorganized shinobi before her. Her plan was simple but devastating. Shatter the army's fragile morale now, and there'd be no rallying to thwart her victory, even if Nathan did manage to appear later. On the front lines, Konoha struggled to hold. Nathan had sent 2 elite squads forward from the base, yet without his presence, their confidence wavered. They weren't going to collapse at the first blow. Nothing short of full defeat would break them, but they teetered close to the edge. Just then, Uchiha Tiehuo, one of Nathan's most loyal supporters, strode into view. His voice rang out clear and commanding. "Hold your positions. Captain Nathan is on his way to reinforce us." At once, the mention of their captain and the weight carried by an Uchiha's promise rekindled a spark of determination among the troops. Yet while his words buoyed his comrades, Tiehuo himself found no solace. Mei's forces pressed in from all sides, and the space around him tightened with every passing second. Though the others felt hope return, Tiehuo realized that his own fight was far from over. Lieutenant Ching had been tracking Nathan's trail when a sudden shout cut through the chaos. Convinced it was Nathan, Ching raced toward the sound, determined to seize him and uncover whatever scheme he'd been plotting. All around, the impression was the same. Nathan must be up to something. What no one realized, however, was that the figure Ching confronted was nothing more than Nathan's shadow clone. The real Nathan was still making his way to the fray. A few minutes later, Nathan arrived on the battlefield. From the shore, he could see the 2 fleets locked in a desperate, bloody struggle. Victory would be decided within moments. Yet Nathan made no immediate move. He activated his Sharingan, its crimson iris unfolding like a blooming flower, and he scanned the entire scene with silent precision. Warships lurched and splintered, waves churned red, and hidden enemies darted between masts, but Nathan's eyes missed nothing. After a measured breath, he deactivated his dojutsu. Without hesitation, Nathan dove into the dark, rolling sea. Kicking with powerful strokes, he cut through the water toward a lone figure hovering at the edge of the conflict. Terumi Mei. Capture the leader first, he reminded himself. Thanks to his brief reconnaissance and the fragmentary memories his clone had relayed, Nathan was now certain that Terumi Mei commanded the Mist Ninjas. If he could stop her here, he might turn the tide of battle and finally uncover the true extent of this deadly assault. Nathan had been ready to strike as soon as Mei Terumi appeared, hoping to shatter the Kirigakure shinobi's morale. But battle is never predictable. Just as he advanced on her, a figure plunged from the sky, crashing through the surf and skimming past him. His Sharingan flared, instantly identifying the newcomer, Uchiha Iron Fire. The Uchiha spat blood, his body reeling from a powerful blow, and he sank headlong toward the ocean floor. Above them, Ao hovered, his Byakugan blazing as he swept the waters for Iron Fire's descent. In an instant, Ao's eyes widened in alarm, and he jerked back. Splash! A shape burst upward out of the sea. A faint metallic rasp announced a blade being drawn, and a cold gleam of steel cut through the air. Before Nathan could react, a long knife seared across his chest. A fierce gust of wind-infused chakra tore through Qinglian's robe, ripping the fabric and lay, having a shallow slash across his chest. He staggered back, one hand pressed to the wound as warm blood welled beneath his fingers. Had he been any slower, that strike would have cost him far more than a mere flesh wound. "Is it you?" Qinglian gasped, wide-eyed, his other hand still covering the cut. Nathan stepped forward from the shadows, every muscle coiled and ready. From the instant Qinglian's Byakugan snapped open, Nathan knew there was no chance of remaining hidden, so he had chosen to strike first. It was a calculated risk. Fortunately for Qinglian, his Byakugan had warned him just in time to twist aside, dimming the blow's power and reducing a potentially fatal injury to a single scar. But the surprise attack had made its point. Nathan's intent was clear. This fight was far from over. Chapter 319. Take action! Yes, it's me! Nathan's voice rang out, steady and unflinching, as he met Qingjeho Yusheng's cold stare. He gave his bloodied longsword a casual flick, sending crimson droplets scattering through the air. Every movement was effortless, radiating the calm confidence of someone utterly fearless. His plan for a covert strike had fallen apart, so he decided to face his enemy head-on. If nothing else, his appearance would rally the remaining Konoha shinobi. Almost at once, their eyes brightened and their postures straightened. That was the power of a leader in the thick of battle. As long as Nathan stood firm, his troops would not falter. Suddenly, a loud splash announced Uchiha Tiehuo's emergence from the water. He clutched his chest, wincing slightly, and called out to Nathan, "Watch yourself. He's incredibly strong." "Understood," Nathan replied with a nod, gripping his sword hilt tighter. "Now!" Tiehuo hissed under his breath. Seizing the moment, Nathan glanced away. He hurled a kunai with deadly precision. The blade sliced through the air, aimed straight for their formidable opponent. Nathan caught the glint of the kunai at the corner of his eye and swung his long sword in a single fluid motion, deflecting the blade with precision. His opponent, Qing, didn't bat an eyelash. In one seamless movement, Qing's fingers danced through the hand seals, Chen, Mao, and he thrust his palms forward, unleashing a dense sphere of water chakra. Water style, water chaos. Qing had intended this simple C-rank ninjutsu, a quick three-seal technique, to catch Nathan unawares. Instead, Nathan beat him to the punch. As his sword rang against the kunai, Nathan's left hand completed a seal. With a guttural exhalation, he expelled a blazing sphere of fire. Fire style, great fireball technique. The two jutsu met in midair with a thunderous crackle, erupting into a billowing cloud of scalding steam. Visibility dropped instantly as mist and vapor swirled across the clearing. Qing, seasoned by countless battles, seized the moment. He melted into the steam's embrace, ready to turn the haze to his advantage and strike from the shadows. He watched as his opponent's hands blurred through the seals, and in an instant, the Hidden Mist Village's signature jutsu erupted. Water style, hidden mist technique. Nathan still had a chance to break the sequence, but he'd been coveting this technique for weeks. Seizing the opportunity, he held back and instead focused every ounce of his chakra to trigger his Sharingan. Through its crimson glare, he memorized each seal, every nuance of the opponent's chakra flow. The moment the mist jutsu was cast, the technique imprinted itself in Nathan's mind, an on-the-fly copy, courtesy of the Sharingan's unique power. He pulled up his skill panel. There it was, staring back at him. Water style, hidden mist technique, level 1, 100. Just like when he'd first acquired wind style, wind blade, the copied ninjutsu appeared at its entry level with no early-stage guesswork required. With his ample chakra reserves, mastering the basics would be effortless, and sparing himself the preliminary trials was a welcome bonus. Nathan's thoughts swirled as he slid the panel shut. His vision had brightened to a bleaching white, and his senses felt dull, as if someone had turned down their volume. Then, whoosh, he caught the faint hiss of something slicing through the air. Instinctively, his hand darted out, sword flashing in his grip. He met a barrage of flying kunai head-on, deflecting each one with precise, controlled blocks. Silence settled again. Nathan didn't move. He simply stood, breathing steadily, waiting for his opponent's next move. A sudden, anguished cry cut through the quiet. Nathan's eyes snapped up. In an instant, he was beside Uchiha, who was slumped against a ruined wall, blood seeping from a kunai buried in his forearm. Tahuo's face was pale, terror flickering in his eyes as he tried to speak. Before he could, a low, menacing voice hissed, "Die!" Something sharp plunged toward Nathan's back. But he'd anticipated the strike. He sprang forward, the kunai passing harmlessly below his shoulder blades. With a powerful twist, he pivoted a full 180 degrees. His sword came up in one fluid motion, blade gleaming as it cut toward the shadowy assailant behind him. What? Ching barely had time to react before Nathan activated the instant sword technique. A vivid green light flared around him, fusing his body with the blade in his hand. In a heartbeat, he was upon Ching. Whoosh! A streak of blade light slashed toward Ching's throat. Instinctively, Ching thrust his kunai up to meet the attack. Ding! The sharp ring of metal on metal echoed through the clearing as the two weapons clashed. The force drove Ching backward, his boots skidding on loose earth. Nathan pressed the advantage without hesitation. He lunged forward, swinging his longsword in a relentless cascade of strikes. Time and again, Ching raised his kunai to block, but Nathan's sword came faster each time. Ching's arms trembled under the onslaught. He had no room to counterattack. As the flurry of blows intensified, Ching's vision blurred. His mind went numb. Then, with a sudden jolt of awareness, he realized how close Nathan's blade was. It hovered at his throat, poised to cut. Desperately, Ching upraised his kunai for one last defense. But Nathan's sword seemed to split into two shimmering images. The first blade slid harmlessly over the tip of Ching's kunai. The second, perfectly hidden behind the illusion, plunged toward him. Ching's heart thundered in his chest as he braced for the strike he never saw coming. Nathan barely had time to register the blade's shift in trajectory. He'd blocked the first strike, but this second one caught him off guard. He felt the long knife slice into his chest before he could tighten his guard. No, he thought, as searing pain exploded beneath his ribs. He staggered back, clutching his wound. Crimson blossomed on his tunic, and worse, the knife had cut deep enough to show bone. Nathan fought down a scream, forcing himself to grit his teeth and groan instead. With the last of his strength, he urged himself away from his opponent. Across the clearing, Kalem Ching, known to most as Qingming, snorted in derision. Too slow, he taunted, already stepping forward to drive his blade home. Suddenly, a twisting torrent of water surged in from the right. It coalesced into a sinuous form, a snorting, azure-scaled dragon, its jaws open in a fearsome roar. The creature barreled straight at Qingming. Water dragon bullet technique? Qingming's eyes widened. In that instant of hesitation, Nathan vanished into the trees. The water dragon struck the ground where Qingming had stood, drenching him in icy spray. Qingming threw up an arm to shield himself, eyes flicking wildly as Nathan's wounded silhouette slipped away into the forest's shadows. Nathan's lungs burned and blood spattered his fingers, but at least he'd bought himself a reprieve. Somewhere deeper in the woods, he could regroup and perhaps find a way to turn the tide. Nathan darted aside, narrowly evading the water dragon's crushing wave. In the same instant, a shimmering blue barrier erupted around him, bisecting the attack. Terumi Mei, there was no mistaking those cobalt eyes, and the rising heat haze from her palms had arrived just in time to protect him. Mei's gaze flicked to Nathan, vigilant and scrutinizing. She had sensed his strength when she sparred with his shadow clone, but seeing him fell Qing so effortlessly still left her incredulous. Nathan, for his part, could only smirk inwardly. His opponent's impatience and underestimation had handed him the advantage. They'd tried to ensnare him with Uchiha Tihuo, but he had anticipated the trap and seized the initiative. If his instant sword technique weren't owned to a razor's edge and his reflexes not lightning fast, that first counterstrike might have ended the battle in a single blow. Even then, it was his phantom sword technique that ultimately crippled Qing. Unfortunately for the injured shinobi, Mei's arrival had been too swift to let Nathan press his advantage further. Chapter 320. A Brief Test. A sharp gust of sea breeze roared across the arena, stirring the mist that Nathan had summoned. Without his chakra to uphold it, the white shroud dissolved in seconds, drifting away on the wind. Nathan fixed Terumi Mei with a steady gaze, saying nothing. She mirrored his stance, her eyes narrowing as she searched him for any sign of weakness. The silence between them grew thick and oppressive, even the air seeming to press in on the two warriors. Nearby, the wounded Nathan and Uchiha Tiehuo struggled to draw a breath, their injuries slowing their recovery. Another blast of wind swept in from the shoreline. Terumi Mei's dark hair whipped across her face, momentarily blinding her. Now! Nathan's thought was as swift as lightning. At his command, chakra surged into the soles of his feet, erupting in an explosive burst of power. The patch of seawater beneath him collapsed inward, as if the ocean itself yielded to his force. In a heartbeat, Nathan became a blur. His form fractured into a trailing afterimage as he closed the distance to Terumi Mei. The roar of the sea and the crackle of chakra seemed to freeze in time around them. With a single fluid motion, Nathan swung his longsword. He poured wind-escape chakra into the blade, igniting it with a vibrant green light that danced along its edge. The blade hummed through the air, intent on testing Terumi Mei's defenses in this sudden, decisive strike. Suddenly, a whisper-thin arc of air, sharp as a blade, sliced toward Terumi Mei's pale throat. "Impossible! So fast!" she gasped. In a heartbeat, Nathan had materialized before her, his long sword aimed at her exposed neck. Feeling the razor edge of his intent, her heart thundered. Instinct urged her to dodge, but a glance at the gravelly wounded Qing behind her made her freeze. If she evaded, Qing would be struck in her place, and that she could not allow. With a silent curse, she tightened her grip on her kunai and planted both feet firmly on the ground. Nathan allowed a faint smile to flicker across his lips as he readied himself. He funneled every ounce of his enhanced strength into his sword arm. Ding! Their steels met with a clear, ringing crash. Though Nathan was still a youth in body, his 16-point boost to physique granted him force far beyond that of most adult shinobi. His longer blade gave him superior reach and leverage against Terumi Mei's kunai, yet she stood her ground without flinching, neither yielding space nor will. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he studied her more closely. He noticed the arm gripping the kunai was noticeably thicker, the muscle fibers beneath the skin rippling with power, a clear sign of a secret technique to amplify strength. Even the surface of the sea beneath her feet had collapsed over a broad swath, evidence that she'd dumped a tremendous amount of force into the water. That single display told Nathan everything he needed to know. Her physical prowess was extraordinary. In their earlier clash with the Shadow Clone, she had danced around close-quarter strikes, giving the impression that she lacked raw strength. But now, he shook his head in silent amazement. She had been hiding her true power from the very beginning. More than that, she was cunning, meticulously masking her talents. He was nearly certain her physical skills matched, if not exceeded, those of any jonin renowned for brute force. After all, someone fated to become a master of shadows could never afford such an obvious weakness. Everything she had shown Nathan before was nothing more than a calculated disguise. Nathan's mind raced as he summoned a sudden burst of strength and drove Mei Terumi back. Her physical prowess was every bit on par with a jonin's, but Nathan's own power and swordsmanship exceeded ordinary expectations. Seizing the moment, he swung his longsword in a wide, razor-sharp arc. Mei Terumi did not flinch. She brought her kunai up just in time to deflect the blow. Clang! Clang! The clash of steel rang across the clearing. They traded strikes in a fierce, unyielding rhythm. Nath and's blade slashing, Mei Terumi's kunai parrying, each move met with an equally skilled counter. Around them, the broader clash between the Mist Shinobi and Konoha forces faltered. Both sides instinctively diverted part of their attention to the duel, recognizing that the outcome of this one-on-one confrontation would decide the skirmish's victor. If Mei Terumi could best Nathan, the Konoha shinobi would be forced to retreat. If Nathan prevailed, the Mist Shinobi would fall back. Strike after strike, block after block, their duel became a blur of steel and sweat. Neither champion showed any sign of conceding. Outside the circle of combatants, both armies watched in tense silence. 5 minutes slipped by in what felt like an instant, the echo of metal on metal still hanging in the air. The battle raged on, its outcome still uncertain. Then, swish, a sharp blade sliced through the air and met flesh. A spray of blood spattered across the ground. Mei Terumi gasped in pain and staggered back, pressing her hand to a fresh gash on her right arm. Her eyes narrowed as she glimpsed the dark crimson stain spreading across her forearm. Every nerve in her arm burned, but she forced herself to focus on the man before her, Nathan, his long sword dripping with her blood. What had just happened? When they'd clashed moments before, Nathan's strikes had been precise, almost noble. Then, in an instant, his style shifted. His blade's arc became twisted and hidden, as though guided by shadows rather than skill. The change was so sudden that May's instincts faltered. She lifted her forearm to block, but Nathan's blow had only just begun. That hesitation, that fraction of a heartbeat, was all it took. Fortunately, May's reflexes were sharp. She twisted her arm just enough to lessen the impact, preventing a worse wound. Yet as she steadied herself, pain searing through her muscles, she realized how dangerous Nathan had become. This was no longer a straightforward duel of equals. He was testing darker techniques, and she would need to match him blow for blow if she hoped to survive. Mai Terumi's footing wavered, her hand trembling as Nathan's blade sliced through the air. She could almost imagine herself crumpling to the ground, just as he had done moments ago under her strike. Even so, her heart pounded in her chest. Nathan's attacks were unlike anything she'd ever faced. He moved so quickly, so unpredictably. Was it real swordplay or some kind of illusion? If she couldn't tell the difference, she'd never mount an effective defense, and the next blow could finish her. She braced herself for another assault when a familiar voice rang out from the edge of the clearing. "May, watch the sword light," Ching called urgently. "He's weaving an illusion into every flash, warping your senses." May blinked, shaken from her concentration by the warning, but Ching's words snapped everything into focus. She recalled the stories of his Byakugan, his ability to perceive chakra flows in excruciating detail. Outside the battlefield's haze, Ching had watched Nathan's technique develop. Even Nathan hadn't realized how deeply he'd layered his chakra into each parry and strike. But Ching saw it all, and he'd paid dearly for the privilege. That last blow from Nathan had nearly taken him out of the fight. An illusion, May told herself, her feet finally steadying on the dirt. She narrowed her eyes, tracing the real steel beneath the flashes of light. Where Nathan meant to disorient her, she would stay grounded. As he lunged again, the sword light flickered, only an afterimage. May tilted her head and let her own chakra flow, heightening her senses. The next clash of steel rang true, solid enough to meet and redirect the blade. For over a week they had sparred like this, but now May's defenses cut through the mirage. She parried, pivoted, and struck back before Nathan could cast another shimmering trick. The tide of the duel shifted as illusion gave way to reality, and Mai Terumi, bolstered by Ching's timely insight, found herself rising to the challenge. Thanks to the solid foundation provided by his level 7 swordsmanship, Nathan's illusion swordsmanship just leapt from level 4, 701, 2000 XP, to level 5, 1150, 5000 XP. In most C-rank skills, level 5 already represents true mastery, and although illusion swordsmanship isn't formally classified as C-rank, reaching level 5 is nonetheless a pivotal milestone. With this upgrade, Nathan can now weave illusions directly from the blade's light. By channeling energy into the sword's gleam, he creates mirages so seamless that opponents struggle to distinguish them from real attacks. It was exactly this refined technique that caught both Ching and Mai Terumi off guard. It wasn't a matter of their vigilance or raw power, but rather Nathan's uncanny finesse. Even if an adversary understands the principle behind his illusion swordsmanship, blocking it in the heat of battle is no easy feat. After all, you can't focus on one strike or one angle without leaving yourself open elsewhere. Thanks to this newfound subtlety, Nathan found himself with countless opportunities to deploy phantom slashes, and what happened today was merely a quick demonstration of his growing prowess. Next, it all comes down to whether the opponent can hang on.